the stars be with you.
All right, all right, all right. Welcome back to the Energetic Principles podcast. Today we have S.J. Anderson joining us once again for the Aries Equinox Ingress episode, seasonal episode, I guess we could say. We're going to absolutely talk about the Aries Ingress, but I think SJ, you joined me last year for this season. Am I correct? Do we have that memory?
I know it was either last year or the year before, but I think it was last year, yes. And yeah, time's gone by so fast, it just
I,
kind of floods by. So I could look it up and find out, but I know it's been relatively recently. I was here to talk about Aries with you, so excited to be back, and thanks for having me back.
Yeah, we had to get the Aries back in here, and so SJ's got those Aries planets going to share with us that Aries wisdom that I know nothing about because I got Ceres and Aries, but that's but I am a Mars chart, so I know a little bit about Mars, but. We got so much here to talk about today. Before we get started, though, SJ, share a little bit about yourself. Let the people know in case they have not witnessed your astrological craft.
Thank you. Yes, yeah, I'm a consulting astrologer. I publish on YouTube and X Twitter regularly about astrology. I kind of see my work as like part publishing about astrology, and then of course I see clients. Half and half of my time is spent on both of those things. Grew up in Texas from Austin and have been working as an astrologer for several years now, and just love it. Love the work, the craft. Feel honored to get to do it and be a part of our community and our profession, and just kind of standing in awe of the astrology day in and day out. It's always so profound and amazing, and so many literal unfoldments. So you can find me sjanderson144.com, at sjanderson144 on every platform, or on YouTube and X are my two socials right now. And yeah, just check me out. I publish pretty regularly on both platforms about all this stuff. That's kind of the short of it. I guess what would you say about my practice? I focused a lot on mundane in the past. I've done some work with let's see, Hellenistic trained, but my practice is not strictly traditional by any means at all. I'm kind of eclectic, you might say. I kind of think about it as like forward, pushing us forward into new astrologies that can be, combinations of everything we've learned and everything that's come before. I personally like Hellenistic rulership as kind of a foundation of what I use, but I'm very much into even like so-called new age topics and like new spiritualism. And I mean, I'm kind of have full embrace of that stuff. And it informs my delineation. It's kind of Rudyard. He's one of my favorite astrologers,
Mm.
actually. And but yeah, so that's a little bit about me. I mean, we can go in. There's a lot, there's a whole
There's
history we
so
could
much,
start,
yeah.
but
How do you sum it up in
yeah.
3 minutes of who you are and what all the things that you filled your brain with over the years? Um, yeah, I remember, I think on maybe the last program or another time that we've shared together, you were talking about, did we say it make or maki?
I think it's
Make,
make.
make.
Mhm.
I remember you were sharing a little information about that, body, and so I had to go like look that, look that up and stuff. So, but I guess that's part of the Aries quality, right? Aries energy wants to take what is new and carve the path for that, which will be a big part, obviously, of what we're going to talk about here today. So why not segue into just the characteristics of Aries energy? So every season we got to start with that just for reference. You might have heard it before, you might not have. I don't know if you're new to astrology or new to this podcast, so we want to cover these bases. So let's think about this Aries energy. Let's think about cardinal fire. Let's think about Mars, and also let's think about like equinox, because obviously that's characteristic of Aries energy. So if you were to jump on the train of any one of those things and tell us about it, SJ, what would you share about Aries?
Let's go solar. I want to come in with solar equinox. I'll come in there because I think the exaltation rulership of Aries being given to the sun is a kind of
Mm,
big part of it. And it's the moment we define it, at least in tropical astrology, when in the northern hemisphere, when the sun takes over and there's more sun than
yeah.
more light than darkness from that point, the ingress of the sun into Aries until the ingress of the sun into Libra. So the two equinoxes are those timing pieces. And so you start getting more sun, more light at this time. And I think that informs the archetype for me in some kind of fundamental sense. I mean, what is the sun? Consciousness, awareness. It is like the seer, you know, sometimes spiritual philosophies talk about the like mind that sees the self. It's kind
Mm.
of the larger awareness mind. And then the
Mm-hmm.
self might be the ego and all the little stories we're telling ourselves. Like that could be Mercury, but the sun is the awareness container. And
Yeah.
so it's very much a sense of selfhood and who am I, and then the fire that can emerge when we get in touch with our selfhood. It's like, wow, I'm powerful, I'm strong, I'm a human being, I'm awake, I'm aware. I mean, these very solar powers, you know, just
Mm-hmm.
to come back to that word. So that's just where I would start. I mean, I can go through all of those if you want, but I'll just start with
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
solar energetic
No,
and
I
the
love
solar
that.
fire awareness. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a, and I mean, I'm already feeling that personally in my own life, like getting to, because just caveat, this season, Aries season is lit, I guess we could say. As the kids say, it's lit. Uh, and what lights us? It's that fire. It's that solar awareness. And I'm already having these, conversations with myself about like, okay, uh, who am I in this moment? How am I evolving? Think about the sun just as that force of combustion, like just constantly radiating and bursting energy, right? And so here we come to our yearly pass of Aries energy where we, combust in sort of the new form of what that self looks like. And each year it's going to be varying, obviously, of like kind of setting the self and its mission and its intention and its under that what you're saying, that conscious awareness of like the ego and the stories, and but how's that changing and where's that going? Think about Aries energy, it's pivot energy. It is, like cardinal wants to pivot, so it's like a ping pong ball, right? Like we hit the corner. We hit the corner at the end of Pisces, and then we bong off to another end of the game. And so um, it's extra potent right now because, just spoiler alert, eclipse season. So we'll just put that on the back burner right now. But that's kind of the first things. Yeah, I love that with the solar consciousness.
And I could just add there, I mean, this is where you start because the sun has rulership over Leo. So how does then Aries get distinguished from Leo? And I think that's where we come in with the Mars, as you described so well, this very
Mm,
martial side, which is doing, making, and
yeah.
Mars is breaking free. It's separating and then going and saying, I want this. And then more than saying, I want it, that might be more solar, like the fire of the self and the awareness of who we are. But when you add the Mars, it's now I'm doing actions that reflect that knowledge of self. And this is the season for that. Initiation is a key word for cardinal signs.
Yeah.
Making, doing, breaking free is the keywords for Mars. So you can see how Aries might be a little bit different. We're not distinguishing it from Leo for those out there listening. Very exciting time to move to powerful initiations of selfhood, and lust for life is a word I always love when I talk about fire signs in
Mm.
general, but I think with Aries it's like that lust for life that then translates effortlessly into making, doing, and so anyhow, it's exciting time every year. We were
Yeah.
talking before, so yeah.
No, I love it. Like lust for life is such a wonderful term, because when I think of fire signs just in general, I think about presence. I think about the now. You take advantage of what is in front of you in this moment. Like when you think about doing, you're not doing in the future and you're not doing in the past, you're doing in the moment. And especially once we leave Pisces energy, because it's always funny to think about like water to fire as far as like just a transition, especially Pisces to Aries. Like talk about like wow, and if you listen to my last podcast where I was talking about the spiritual washing machine, that's Pisces, right? Like we get thrown in, we get in the spin cycle, we get lost out, you're like, is this gonna ever end? And then all and a lot of times it's about that clearing out. It's like that receptive, like feminine sign energy where it can be more in the past, and this like maybe reflective and like how do I move through the the varying states of the old and even like sort of the visions of the future to get to this present moment of Aries. And what do you do with the present? Because as you know, cliche as it sounds, you know, the power is in the now. So what are you doing with your now? I guess is the question.
Yep. Love that. Just love it. The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle. I don't know if you ever
I
saw that
know.
book, but
Yep.
that was a big book around my, 20 years ago, super popular. Everybody was passing it around. I remember reading it, and it's a powerful book, but it's
It
all about that,
is.
the energy of the self that we can be aware of as we're with present moment awareness, and how that can, when we prioritize that, it really can support thriving. So.
Oh, thriving. That's another nice word there. Yeah, I want to. Well, so what's the interesting? I might be skipping ahead of some of the things we're going to talk about here, but just thinking about Aries and Taurus energy together, because we are going to have a very strong flavor going on in Taurus with Jupiter, Uranus. And, I think about Aries sort of as that survival energy, but maybe Taurus as that thrival energy, and how we can maybe combine the two together, because we're going to be working on both those states of awareness with Aries and Taurus. And obviously there's going to be a lot going on in Aquarius and Pisces too. So it's a lot of, yeah. All the elements are going to be represented here. So let's think about Mars. So if, we're in Aries season, we're getting to Aries season. And so obviously the focus is going to be on Mars from the solar perspective, because the sun, even though the sun is exalted in Aries, it is not as in its domicile. So it still has to look to Mars and be like, okay, Mars, what's the mission? What do you want me to do? And so we basically have a Mars in Aquarius for a very, decently short amount of time. And then we get Mars in Pisces for most of Aries season. So thoughts on that, SJ?
Yeah, I mean, I love Mars and Pisces. I think it's one of the best, most interesting Mars signs, because it does have some strength there, at least in terms of traditional dignity scheme.
Mm.
But when we have the dream realm and the confused, unknown dream realm that's very creative, how does that support action, which is a keyword for Mars? This is the question with Mars and Pisces. And I was talking about this recently. You can go to Wikipedia and type in inventions or things that people received in a dream, and there's a whole Wikipedia page that talks about, like, Paul McCartney
Oh,
received the melody for Yesterday in a dream, and then he comes out of the dream. So the dreams deliver the action if we allow it. And that page has like hundreds of like scientific breakthroughs came in the dream. I mean, it's the dreams realm, aka the Piscean, is almost an essential component when you start thinking about systems of acting and action. So that's what I look for Mars and Pisces, is tapping into non-logical, intuitive, symbolism, all of these things to inform whatever our new initiations are going to be during Aries season.
yeah, it's definitely in that like creative space, that creative inspiration of what gosh, I've been there with like certain dreams that I come out of them, especially like being a musician. Like I have like created things in the dream, and it'll be like a strong musical melody component. And it's always so interesting when you wake up and like I'll wake up in the middle of the night and then I'm out in the living room like trying to like transfer that to a voice message, and it just never sounds as heavenly as it did in the dream. Like it just, but that's the nature of the dream versus the physical reality of creation, which is a podcast in itself. But I love that quality of thinking about like essentially the imagineering process that happens with Mars in Pisces. And so I guess the one thing I would say to like pair with that could be part of Mars and Pisces issue as far as doing is thinking about it being mutable water. But I always think about Mars and Pisces as like it has maybe steam to do things sometimes and it doesn't the other times. If it doesn't feel like it, it's not going to, kind of take action. So there, or when I always think about mutable energy as like sidewinding, sort of like how a snake moves, it's like it goes one way and then it maybe backs up and goes the other way. And then, so it's just not this like linear sort of cardinal, like fire off, shoo. It's more like, yeah, okay, over here. Yeah, so with any placement, there's these lovely blessings of the placement, and then there's these other just awareness of how it works and how it might not be, how it could possibly be a little challenging to uh just, I mean, rocketing forward with Aries intentions. Mars and Pisces is a little slower, or a little distracted, or a little but hey, the spiritual mission, if your spirit is speaking it, like maybe that's just where all the power comes from, and you're channeling the drive from the higher sources. Yeah.
For sure. I mean, everything's got a continuum, and I would say I like what you said. I was saying circuitous, sidewinding. You just said I forgot the word you used there, but basically, we might want to either acknowledge that we're lost. That's a key word for Pisces, lost in the
Yeah.
dream. It's like there's like the whole film plots, like he's not waking up from the dream. Oh my, you try to bring people out of like some altered state back into the real world. So that would certainly be a risk. I think, you might want to frame it. I kind of try to like keep the positive going. Not that this is negative to even talk about these continuums or anything like that, but maybe the idea of like the virtue of the journey, not the destination, is the kind
Ah,
of point of the action,
yeah.
where you take the circuitous path, but that's kind of what the assignment is. And so you kind of give yourself permission to embrace the unknown as a kind of as the mission, so this is kind of maybe the reframe, but I think we will be
I like
navigating
that.
within this. Yeah.
No, I love that. Because one of the things that I'm hearing you say is part of that. mm, I guess I'm going to use the word surrender to the mission, is that when you're only on your own agenda, right? Think about Aries just on its own agenda, and being fire and cardinal. It's very pushing outward. It's very like outward focus, versus being on the journey and being in more of this receptive space where there's the opportunity for synchronicity or serendipity to happen that you can't do on your own accord when you're just, this is where I'm going. I'm headed there. Doop, doop, doop. But when you're allowed to maybe meander a little bit, or get distracted and take the path that you feel called to, um, just because for whatever mysterious reason, and then all of a sudden you meet this person, or you encounter this thing that changes your whole perspective, or gives you an opportunity, or what have you. So no, I love thinking about it that way. It leaves room for yeah, it just leaves room for what could happen that you can't do on your own.
Yes. And I mean, we can think about the 12th house here. And I say that because from Aries, Pisces is the 12th sign. So
Yeah.
not because, I mean, I'm not against ABC, I think they call it, or one, two,
Yeah,
three, or
yeah.
whatever it is, alphabet, whatever the
The
name for
alphabet
that
astrology.
system
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
I think it's got some utility and some interesting uses for sure. But we have something in traditional astrology called derived houses, where you just pick a point and then you put that point and the sign that that point is in as the first whole sign house. And then now you can delineate a chart. So in this case, if we look at Aries being the first house, because that's where the sun is, and we're trying to understand this Aries moment, Pisces is always 12 from Aries. It's this tension you raise of like, yes, I'm a self. Yes, I know I'm going to go build because I know who I am. So that's Aries. But when you have Pisces, in this case, connected to Aries because Mars is there ruling Aries, where it's just what you say, it's like, well, not so fast, because Pisces is definitely a sign of collective. The 12th house is collective. It's groups
Yeah.
of people. It's outer world. It's above the horizon. And so you can, through the 12th house, get to this idea of we're going to be confronted with other people and problems and issues. That's also a 12th house theme. But even Pisces, it's Jupiter ruling Pisces, it's Venus ruling Pisces. And those are signs of other people as well. Venus, unification with
Mm.
Jupiter is all about group connectivity, you know, and so there's something in, I think, this moment where it's like, yes, we can try to push forward, but we're going to be confronted with the fact that we're not alone. I mean, even a strong Aries sector doesn't mean you're alone. I mean, we're never alone in this world. We're actually interconnected with all beings, if you want to take it quite esoteric. And so, yes, that I think that tension that you raised is like a major theme of this moment. And we're going to be figuring out just how much we can push out and how maverick we need to be. And at the same time, the limits of that and like the virtues of our interconnectivity.
Activity, yeah.
It's a really cool moment.
And I think this is a perfect segue to start to talk about eclipse energy, right? Because that's a big part of this Aries season is first we're going to get a lunar eclipse in well, first let me just say that we're starting the season under this new moon in Pisces energy that is still characterizing you know, the lunar cycle that we're under, which the new moon in Pisces is kind of sextiling that Uranus action and that Jupiter energy that is moving there. But it will then culminate into, you know, we have cardinal quarters, which I think cardinal quarters are always very initiating, pushing the, you know, the new story, the new chapter. But we have that lunar eclipse in Libra that's going to be taking place, which really speaks to what SJ was just talking about with the awareness of interconnectivity in our lives versus our own maverick, independent, egoic mission that we might be on. And then, of course, we're going to have a total solar eclipse in Aries take place. And I just want to point out with some of the things that we were just talking about with Mars energy as far as eclipses are concerned, because you know, in traditional theory, when do we get an eclipse activated? I mean, there's different modes, but one of the main ones is when Mars moves over the eclipse degree, right? And kind of activates that. So if we think about just timing wise, and that's not going to happen, Mars isn't going to reach the total solar eclipse degree until I believe May 26th, around there. So think about just that amount of space from you know, late March, or you know, mid-late March until mid-late May, and the Mars journey that is going to yeah, that Mars journey that has to kind of sort itself out before it hits the mission, I guess, or hits the, you know, the impetus of what really the solar eclipse, or at least that's how it stands in my mind. I don't know how you feel about that, SJ.
I mean, there's different techniques. I mean, that would be certainly interesting. I think Mars and Aries itself is an interesting transit to come so soon after a solar
Yes.
eclipse there, because what it means is that the ruling planet, basically the shocks and inversions and the faded, you know, openings and closings of eclipse season are shortly followed by Mars coming back to like make sure everything got done as it needed to do, and maybe even to clean it up even more. You know, Mars will come in and give us power to like take even further actions that might be implied by the events that the eclipses bring. So like events happen, and then as an example, you learn something about yourself in a context of a relationship. We have eclipses in Aries and Libra. And let's say it's like, I know now that I want this, I want children, just to go to an example for like a
Yeah.
potential relationship. And then the reverberations of that mean that what the corollary of that awareness would be, okay, now you would try for children when Mars comes to Aries. You know, so it can be something like this where Mars comes to then allow for action that the eclipses brought support and understanding around. That's how I see it now. The exact eclipse degree, yeah, that's always interesting to note, but I kind of do more sign based and more
Yeah.
flow of theme. That's kind of just
Makes
the kind of
sense.
astrologer I am. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, nothing is ever pinpointed exact to the moment. It has a before story, it has an after story. It's a continuum of
Yeah.
influence. So I totally get it. Like the second Mars moves across the, you know, 0 degrees Aries world point, everyone is going to be like, woo, woo. It's like just getting the blowback from that fire starter.
Oh, yes.
Which is interesting. Spoiler alert: Venus will move into Taurus exactly at the same time. So that's not until Taurus season. But yeah, so Anywho, what other things can we share about? Actually, I'll save for the solar eclipse. I did want to, when you were speaking, I broke out, Burned at Brady's book last night, and I was looking at the Saros cycle, for the eclipses and what she wrote. So remind me to share that, actually,
Okay,
SJ, when
I'm
we get
interested. Yeah,
to eclipses. But okay, so obviously the eclipse rulers, right? We're still talking about Mars and Venus here with that Aries Libra energy, are actually going to be highlighted by Saturn. They're going to meet conjunctions with Saturn this season, and then they're going to go on to activate through sextile the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, which is going to have perfect at the beginning of Taurus season, but we're going to feel the whole buildup to what that grand conjunction looks like. And I definitely, should I pick your brain about Jupiter Uranus now, SJ? Should I save it for the end of the
sure.
program? What are you want to give
I
us?
can give you just a couple quick, I mean, just my quick thoughts on it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm interested just to say the historical cycle. I think it's 1941 summer. I forgot. I think it's June, May or June 41. Orson Welles releases the masterpiece that, I mean, I think the film's okay. It's not, but I can't. It's blanking now. What's his big movie about the media
The
mogul? Citizen Kane. Citizen
Citizen
Kane.
Kane. Yeah.
So
I'm like Snow
that's
Globe. That's like
yeah,
Rosebud.
Rosebud and Snuggle. But I mean, that's been known for decades as like the best movie of all time. So I mean, these kind of creative breakthroughs. There was a ship that was captured by the Allies that ended up cracking the German code that the famous British mathematician worked on. They made a film about him. His name is escaping me. He was gay and ended up going through like oppression because of his sexuality, and then ate a poison apple to kill himself. Everybody will know who he is when we're
Whoa.
talking. He worked on this, the Enigma device is what it was called, but they discovered the materia that would go into breaking that code during Jupiter, Uranus and Taurus. So, these are the kind of things, just as an example, breakthroughs around technology, forward movement in terms of art and creativity that might be before its time. I think
Yeah.
Citizen Kane flopped at the box office, but it was a creative breakthrough like no one had seen. Those are just two things on my bingo card that I think encapsulate the transit. The other thing I'll just say is like stock market euphoria. We're seeing that now, and that could continue, into April, maybe with this applying and then perfecting. What is it, 21, 22 April? So, look for that. It's just irrational exuberance, Jupiter expanding Uranus. There's all kinds of, I mean, that's a whole separate conversation, but the new tech
Yeah.
that's out there, AI, crypto, all of these technologies that are booming right now in terms of their share prices and asset prices would fit the symbolism as well. But those are just some quick thoughts. I mean,
I
it's
know
it's
it's how do you sum up Jupiter and Uranus together like that? You could you can make a whole career off that. Plenty to say. It brings me back to some of the things that Gray Crawford and I were talking about in the year ahead episode, because one of the things we have to take into account, especially when Uranus is involved, is that there's always this element of being ahead of its time, right? So when we think about what we might see around Jupiter Uranus energy, is like we can see these breakthroughs or maybe these creative ideas or something, prototypes being implemented, but we don't really see the implication of what that can become when time and is involved. So thinking about the inception of technology or innovations or forward thinking, especially in more of these practical realms when we're talking about finances and business and property and land and food and agriculture and product, all these types of things. We'll just have to sort of like hold space and really pay attention, especially in late April, what we see in the news feed and what we see around us and what we hear people talking about, because these little buzzes could be like the next establishment, I guess we could say. We think about Taurus. So exciting. I always like to one of the things, I've shared this on the podcast before, but I'll share it with you, SJ. It was one of the things with the Jupiter Uranus conjunction in Taurus back in the mid 1800s. It was like 1857, somewhere around there. I thought it was fascinating that that's around the time that the Borden company, which has what's this like figure is like
The
literally a
cow.
cow head,
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
came
Yeah.
came out with the it was like a milk company, but it came out with its first offering of Elmer's glue, and we
Oh,
think about, and we think about like it turned into crazy glue, like the intense, crazy glue, but just thinking about like that kind of breakthrough through like the dairy
yeah.
industry of creating, this everyday household product, this everyday product that kids use, like you're just thinking about just easy glue like that it's just these practical innovations that can change the whole way, yeah. So it was a little fun
One
fact
other one.
story.
One other one on that actually that is from that same transit, the
Mhm.
1857, I think, is that it was the first postage stamps that were released by I think both France and Britain, official government postage.
Oh,
I'd have to go back on that. I cover this in my year ahead that I did on the YouTube channel World Astrology Report. It's a channel I appear on all the time, and we do a monthly and a year. We did a year ahead this year, and so that's an idea of a kind of an innovation where you have
yeah.
the stamps and the ability to connect. I believe it's that transit. I hope I didn't misspeak on that. It may be that had to do with Neptune in Pisces with Saturn. It's possible. I think it may be that one. Actually,
Like, no,
sorry to bring up something I'm not
that's
certain
okay. I
on,
mean,
but
maybe they're
okay.
like, hey, send us on the mystery, SJ. Like, let us go figure it. Let's go figure it out. Get
Well,
intrigued.
and there's a sextile. I think that's just one layer to add here. Maybe my misremembering or my not full picture will bring us here, but it's the sextile between Saturn and Neptune. They're getting closer to orb around this time. I mean,
Yes.
they're as close as they've been now, and they peak here in 2024. They get just over 10 degrees apart. I think it's in June. And so we're, that late April moment of Jupiter, Uranus perfecting there, that though the rays they cast back are right in between Saturn and Neptune as they're within getting closer and closer. So there's a whole Saturn Neptune vibe it's all interfacing with directly by sextile, but also by rulership, Jupiter ruling Pisces.
Yeah.
And that is just to say a few things here that I think are part of this, like the tech stuff with like the unknown of the Apple Vision Pro and these kind of lost
Yeah.
worlds. Talk about being
Mm-hmm.
lost in Pisces with the technology. And I think we're seeing some of that. And so I'm looking for tech breakthroughs, of course, AI and VR. I mean, these are all on our bingo card for the Piscean stuff. But it's just maybe I think it is the stamps connected to that because those are connecting the world and it's like new ways to connect. That's very
Yeah.
Piscean
Mm-hmm.
and Neptunian. But anyhow,
Yeah, no, I mean it's all relevant. We're having like that whole Saturn Neptune business, which we're definitely feeling the culmination of. It's a much slower brew than say Jupiter Uranus, well, which also makes sense when we think about Saturn and Neptune versus Jupiter Uranus energy, just as archetypes. But that's the next big conjunction after this Jupiter Uranus meeting, is Saturn and Neptune, which deserves a whole podcast series on its own. Stay tuned, people. We don't want to overwhelm you during this movement. So now the last thing we're going to talk about real quick before we get to our charts is the fact that good old Mercury is going to break the forward momentum of all planets direct and go retrograde right in time for eclipse season. Mercury has the best timing. So any thoughts about like Mercury getting another Mercury retrograde in Aries? We had one last year, but and in eclipse, was it? The Mercury was retrograde in the eclipse last year too, at least the solar eclipse. So any thoughts around
I do have those thoughts. I think they're more related to like some of the eclipse delineation, but maybe I'll give a little preview here. I mean, it's Aries, it's past with Mercury retrograde. It's considering the past. And this Chiron eclipse, I mean, it's going to be
yeah.
right with Chiron, but within a degree minute. The natal US Chiron is in the same degree. So it's the Chiron return for America, and it is also a Chiron eclipse and Mercury's retrograde. I think there's a whole like kind of wounds of war is the thing I've been
Mm,
describing for this. And when you have Mercury there, I mean, we might be looking back at kind of the ramifications of the empire effectively and the damage. And we've got wars, right? There's wars in the world,
Yeah.
in Ukraine and Palestine, Israel, that America is directly involved in both. And so I'm looking for these eclipses to kind of be reviewing about the history and the kind of ramifications of America's role in warfare. And maybe I think the most optimistic might be like upsides, like reconsidering, previous tactics. Maybe this will be a shift in some of these tactics to maybe more pushing for peace rather than just funding war. And so, that's just one idea.
Yeah.
Setting all that aside is just Mercury retrogrades in Aries. Like you start something and then you can't continue. So, I mean, whatever gets initiated, 20 March, I think Mercury comes there at 11 March. Pretty soon it'll be there. And, look for, it's kind of like a whole stop and start theme. So everything we've already discussed about like these new initiations, and then you have Mars and Pisces, these circuitous, dreamy blocks, if you want to
Yeah.
just say it like that. But now you have these mercurial blocks that are going to emerge where I think we're going to have to review all of it's unfortunate with this Aries season because there's really a lot of blockage in it. And it might not be till Taurus season when the
Yeah.
Aries energy actually settles and we have a clear path ahead after eclipse season, after Mercury stations direct, and once Mars arrives. So that's just kind of how I contextualize it within these other cycles. But
That makes a lot of sense. And it's good to kind of get that out there right now as we look at some of the energy and we're about to, as we're about to live it, to have that foresight, to have that consciousness, right? We're looking for that bigger, higher mind consciousness to remember these things as the ego lives them, especially if we encounter things like frustration or deflation or, complication or,
yeah.
or things that just don't move as fast as we would like them to. Or if we're not moving as fast as we think we should be moving, like we are allowed to give ourselves that grace, I guess we could say.
The side quest. There might be some side
The
quests here, I
side,
think.
I like
Yeah.
side quest. I like that. That's it's like think about that any good story. It's like you got your main storyline, but there's all these other side storylines that all, this comes back to what we were just saying about the journey, SJ. It's like it all comes back to the main character. It all it's all interconnected. So we have to maybe honor the side journeys, honor the I think I'm like the frontage roads, on like a freeway. You got your frontage, you got your side road too. Like it's okay it's still going to get you where you're going. Maybe you're not on the fast straightaway, but there is, the path is still moving forward.
That's funny. I haven't thought about frontage roads in
Yeah.
many years because I haven't needed to, but that's so much time on frontage roads in my life.
Oh,
So
really?
anyhow,
Oh, funny.
but just in Texas, the highways run right through there. And like I grew up, we're basically off I-35 in Austin. So everything is like going to I-35 or off it or exiting from it. So it's just a big part of my life. So it's just, I'm smiling because it's just like memories
Yeah.
come back. Think about a
Oh, well.
frontage road, but.
Well, we're still in Pisces season, so I'm glad I could give you that memory. Take you down the frontage road lane.
Oh, thank you.
All right, so let me go ahead and share our chart here, okay, I'm wondering if I'm going to rearrange my situation. There we go. I got you. You still see the chart, SJ?
I can see it good, yeah.
Okay. Figured I'd put it on my main screen here. I got one of those setups now where on my I used to have a big iMac. I mean, I still do, but it's getting a little old. It's a little rickety. It's not as as it used to be. So I have this iMac or MacBook Pro setup that has like these, I call it the control station. It has this thing that kind of goes over and it gives me two other screens on each side. I don't know if you've seen those before, but
Awesome.
yeah, I'm doing this whole podcast with that sort of layout, but looking one way and then the other, which is very Pisces season. I'm like, I'm going to put it straightforward. Chart is straightforward so we can just get in there. And so how are we going to get in there? We're actually going to start with the Aries Ingress set for Washington, D.C., March 19th, 2024. 11:06 p.m. Eastern time. And yeah, there is a lot to share about this chart. So we're gonna spend maybe like 5-10 minutes on it. Get my annotation tools out. So any particular things that pop out to you right away, SJ?
Yeah, the big concern, and we'll just start with the bad news, is Mars right on the IC. You see that?
Yeah.
And Mars rules the ascendant and rules the sixth house of health, and it's on the IC. And so my real big concern, just based on the symbols of this chart, is what if there's some kind of, health, collective health crisis that really wreaks havoc. And there was memes going around during the Super Bowl, and these memes were 2020 and 2024, and it listed all of the exact similarities, like Biden versus Trump. It was Chiefs versus 49ers. And there's many more of these synchronistic matches between 2020 and 2024. But then, of course, we know what happened in 2020 with COVID. So people are like, is there going to be some kind of health? And then health crisis that emerges. And then I saw this and I was like, uh-oh. I mean, these symbols don't look good for, like, some kind of, I don't know, they call it disease X, or what are other people calling it? Now, that's just the symbols in the chart. My personal sense from looking at the news and just kind of interpreting it, we always have to use astrology to interpret it through our boots on the ground factual knowledge of reality. And my sense is that, even if there is something like that, I mean, I don't see it being as big. COVID started in 2019, December, and by 2020, it was already a huge story globally. It was just in China first. So
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing like that now. I mean, we have no like disease in China. So it's kind of like a little bit late in terms of the syncopation to assume we're going to have something else like that in 2024. But this also leads me to believe you might have some kind of IC can be opposition. It's
Yeah.
the political opposition. The
Yeah.
MC is the ruling party. And I think this does not bode well for like the election. If there's some kind of wars over, what is the nature of the election? Is it fair? Is it not fair? Who wins? This looks like violence from the opposition, and just symbolically, and people can kind of apply that to however they want to apply it. I'm not really saying, I don't really know, what's going to happen, but we know that we had, just in terms of what, the narratives that are in the mainstream media, the insurrection on 6 January, as they call it, from, Trump supporting people. And that would fit some kind of like echoes of that, unfortunately. So, I hate to like start out with like COVID 2.0, insurrection
I know
2.0. I
you're
mean,
like, well,
but,
it's not
but,
these. Yeah.
we have to just, I mean, get that out of the way, because Mars on an angle so close, it is
Yeah.
within 3 degrees, that you
It's
can't really get
contentious.
around that. Yeah, you can't get around that. You have to say challenges. And then what is Mars rules? First house of the self of the country, sixth house of the health of the country. So we know that those topics that are blended right with the root of the country itself, where it wants to express through. And in Aquarius, it's not an easy sign for Mars. That's not the best Mars placement. So
Mm.
anyhow, go ahead. Sorry to just extend
No,
it there,
I
but
mean, you're not wrong. Oh, and we're in this place of speculation. That's the beauty of astrology, especially mundane, is like we don't know what's going to happen. We just look at, the signs and the symbols and see what pops up. Another thing I think I would add to that, just thinking about the sixth house speaking to the labor force,
yeah,
and the people being very aggro, rightfully so, for labor practices and what's being asked of us, what we're being asked to do every day, and how we are being compensated fairly. I think about the kind of egalitarian sort of principle of maybe Aquarius, and fighting for something that is fair and humane, and seeing more, especially with Jupiter and Uranus basically sandwiching the descendant. Like
sure.
there's and then, I mean, sign based wise, Mars is still squaring that position. So it feels, especially when we think about just the people being the first, but also the people being ruled by the moon, or not ruled by the moon, but represented by the moon, and seeing that in that place of coming off the opposition to Pluto too. It feels like the people are not, there's nothing happy about the people here. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of what, so I feel like there's going to be a lot of protest or division or just frustration and potentially violence around those kind of work. But it's also, they're intertwined, right? SJ, you think about our work practices and how they affect our health, our mental health. If we're in jobs that don't give us good quality care to healthcare, and we're like the working sick, basically, where we just have to, kind of like they're all intertwined to the well-being of the people. So it feels
Yeah.
very, yeah.
Yeah, and just to come back, I love that you mentioned labor in the sixth house, because this is also AI, huge layoffs
Yeah.
accelerating. I mean, every week people are losing their jobs to AI, to the Aquarius. And what kind of tension, could that bring in terms of, just a malaise? I mean, this to me feels like explosions from the root, that it's like the problem can't be avoided anymore. And so there's like this explosions from the kind of core of the root, which is fixed signs are that, and then the IC is that, and doesn't look good, does it? And I think that square to Uranus is potentially even more surprising surprises. I mean, this is Mars square Uranus, 7 degrees, but still, that's pretty tight orb, and it's locked into the chart. And so it feels contentious, enemies at home affecting the people around, maybe prominence and big headlines. That's the moon in the 10th. I
Yeah.
think America will be, I mean, it's an election year, so we already know it's going to be
We
in the
already know it's
headlines.
gonna be wild.
Yeah.
And well, and that might be part of the tension too, when we think about all the focus that is going into that seventh house place of like, maybe overseas, or sort of the warring factions, or putting interest into allies, or, or our, enemies. So, quote unquote, where there's such problems at home. It's like, oh, you're putting all this, Jupiter, Uranus like energy into the what's over there. And it's like, you're totally ignoring like the steaming pot of eruption that is happening, underground, right? You think about that fourth house energy. It's like this, like the volcano. It's like the pressure is there, but it's ignored or chosen to go the other way because of all this, outside interest. Or that might be part of it too. It's like all the outside interest, is basically taking away from focusing on, the people and their needs and taking care of your own country. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm like, let's find something good here, SJ.
Yeah, there's good stuff. No, there's great stuff actually, for sure. I just want to say about that. I mean, just look, Saturn rules the third and fourth, and Saturn's in the fifth. I mean, all of that action is under the horizon with the Saturn story. And I think you're wise to point that, hey, there's some kind of focus on the home. Third house can be like the communication networks and rails and the homeland. Fourth
Infrastructure.
house is infrastructure. Fourth house is the homeland. Fifth house is like the creativity, domestic creativity. And that's a huge component here. Maybe creative protests or like meme wars to express anger or something like this. So let me just say that the good stuff, if that's okay.
I'm like, or the future of the children, SJ. What about the future of the children?
For
Yeah.
sure. And this is what's awesome in the chart. So Saturn is bonified between Jupiter and Venus by very close to bonification. Saturn is sextiling Jupiter within 3 degrees, and Venus is applying to Saturn within 2 degrees. So that is a special condition that means Saturn has a lot of protection and support, Saturn in Pisces, and it's in the fifth house of creativity. I go with continued creative breakthroughs. That's one delineation of Saturn in Pisces that I love, and we've seen it with certain cinema like Dune 2. I mean, that's been it's a beautiful film. The creativity and the arts. I mean, just like last year with Saturn and Pisces, Taylor and Beyonce. Not that that's like the pinnacle of creative music, but there is a kind of emphasis on the arts, even last summer with Oppenheimer and Barbie, where cinema was
Yeah.
celebrated. There really has been a sense of the cinema is back, especially after the COVID years. And I imagine that 2024 to 2025 will continue with some really beautiful creative unfoldment. If you're in the AI space, which of course Saturn and Pisces rules the Aquarian, we're talking about a lot of creativity with AI tools. I know that's controversial, but there is certainly a component of it that's extremely creative. I've used
Right.
it to expand my creative powers way beyond anything I could have ever done with some of my astro work. And so there is a huge creative, like the new frontiers of the creative is what, like
Mm-hmm.
Saturn is the boundaries and the frontiers, and Pisces is the creative. And we're discovering a lot of new frontiers right now creatively. So that's my delineation to it. I love that you've got the sextile of the ascendant, you know, that's the trine, that's the fifth house, right?
Yeah.
Trine in the
It's
ascendant, and it's our
yeah. Well,
creative
and I just think
powers.
about
So anyhow,
the people, right? You know, like we're coming back. So here, I've alluded to this before in the podcast, but I'm gonna share it again. Is I feel like one of the most creative times that people experience is in times of hardship or certain sufferings. Personally, as like, you know, an artist, I feel like when there's kind of this contentious space, whether it's outside or within us, a lot of times there's these really next level pieces of creativity that are really connected to the human condition and the human spirit and the kind of more the spirituality, right? You think about Pisces, and the fact that this, you know, Venus, Saturn energy and Jupiter, it's all aligned with sort of that, you know, the ascendant of the people themselves. It's like, so you're in these rough conditions otherwise. Well, how do you use your creativity to bring, you know, the lightness or the joy or the feeling of, you know, just being connected to, I don't know, I don't want to say your bliss. I feel like art, if you're an artist, you understand that there is this like fine edge between being in your bliss and absolute suffering. Like and like having to suffer through the art so that you can get to the bliss of the actual calling and while it's moving out of you. So, and that really confirms once again what we were talking about with Jupiter Uranus energy of so many creative breakthroughs and what can come out at this time too. So yeah. So it's I guess it is that blessing that we're talking about, but it feels like it's wrapped up in also the difficulty and why, or maybe why we come to creative breakthroughs because of, you know, say scenario. Just like recently, what was it I saw on Instagram? It was like a live the people at that run the music department at YouTube. Um I think they just all got laid off simultaneously because Google laid them off because they were asking for some sort of something with their job that they needed more of, or like, you know, trying to get workers' rights to some extent. And they were in a part of like a live hearing before some like court or, you know, and they literally got the email from Google, and the girl walks up, shows the guy who's like sharing the information, and it's like, no, we literally just got fired, you know. But what do all those people go do? You know, you get laid off from the machine that is, you know, the multi-billionaire conglomerate of Google. And what do all those creative minds go do for themselves? They're not going to stop being creative. Like, so what can come out of being maybe annexed from the actual you know, the corporation side of creativity to then go into this, you know, we're still going to be creative, we're still going to do our jobs, we're going to do what's next, you know. So that just that could be an aspect.
yeah, life finds a way, and you know, and it will find a way here. And you know, there's all kinds of cool stuff out in this world that you know, including the upsides of AI. And I would encourage people to use it. I recommend it because, you know, it's where the world's going. And I wanted to say this, it's like the internet in the 90s. I mean, that's where we are with the Saturn cycle. So early 90s, internet is born. Saturn in Aquarius. When Saturn comes to Pisces, then that's when a lot of these websites that are household names were born. So Amazon and Yahoo get born. And then and so that's where we are. And what's the new tech? What's the AI tech? It all came online with Saturn and Aquarius. And so we're in this kind of real creative, expansive phase with it. And I think when Saturn enters Aries, we'll see things like what came out during that time, like the Matrix film, like
Mm,
this real kind of the newness that emerges around what was born. You know, the Matrix is like the idea of first fighting, so that's Aries, but you know, it's the notion of the web. You know, that's a creative extension of the web, would be to make a narrative about being in a machine and then we wake up in a machine. It's just one example, but
yeah.
I am very interested in the creative now that it's been born with the Saturn and Aquarius transit, like where we're going with this stuff. And yes, it's going to be painful, but it'll be, life will find a way and there'll be a lot of cool stuff going on for sure. So
I love that. Just that's a good something to just take away from all of what we're talking about and just Aries season in general and eclipses is that life finds a way. So no matter where you are at, what you're experiencing, um, the highs, the lows, the in-betweens, like, you know, it's true. The last thing I just want to point out real quick before we move on, because you know, we can get caught in this chart all day if we allow ourselves to. It's just because we haven't actually talked about the sun, the sun at all, which is funny because it is about the solar ingress of Aries, of the sun into Aries. But I did just want to kind of point out this connection with the sun being involved with this moon Pluto
yes.
zone, connecting the, you know, the 4th, 10th, the 6th, which is going to bring up themes that we kind of already talked about. But just what do you think, SJ, was just like the kind of the solar presence
Mhm.
here in this chart?
Yeah, it was actually my second. There was two positive that I've talked about in the video I had done earlier with on World Astrology Report. But we talked about lust for life. I use that term in the video because you have
Mm,
a moon sun trine that's still in orb
yeah,
and it's very close. And this brings the fire element with the two luminaries, which in some sense are the most important planets in any chart. I mean, because they're called the rulers of the whole in some of these ancient texts. And you know, this is the body, or the people, as you mentioned earlier, and then this is the king or the solar awareness or the kind of the leader. And so there's this great connection with like some kind of fiery, impassioned energy. I think this might be like if we think sixth house of health, you know, there's a lot of people talking about Biden's health and what if that like he bows
yeah,
out and it reignites, like Kamala comes in. I just saw Kamala was speaking and she's now front and center. That's a decision to make her front and center now. And she said, I call for ceasefire in Palestine. And she's been hugely applauded all over social media. People are like, huge passion has now emerged around Kamala just for her saying that. And I feel like that they may be getting ready to, this is a whole nother story. I'll just throw it in here, but
hmm,
eclipses in Aries in 1968. It was the late March, 3 days after that solar eclipse. LBJ says, I won't run again. And I think that's still on the bingo card for 2024 that, and they've been setting it up even with Joe Biden, like even in the mainstream, like he doesn't look very good. Everybody knows that there's a health potential issue with him.
yeah.
What if this eclipse season sees Kamala ascending, and then you would have the woman, that's the moon,
The moon, I
you
know,
know,
that's what I was thinking.
yeah, yeah, and the queen, and it's handed over to Kamala, and you know that so that's the maybe the mundane, but the and it would fit with Pluto because that's like first woman president of America. That would be huge. I mean,
Yeah.
for Pluto and Aquarius, a challenge to the convention. But setting that aside, I think for everywhere and all of us, you know, it goes back to lust for life as the theme. I said that in the video. Like I
Mm,
think we have a real sense here of like it's creativity with Pisces and exploring those boundaries. But this really is like what lights you up. Ask yourself that. You go back to the doors. I think I don't know if we talked about that. I think
no,
before
I
we
don't think
mentioned Jim
did
Morrison.
we?
Okay,
No, I
yeah.
don't think,
No,
yeah.
no, but we were talking about Jim Morrison earlier, and but you know, it's light my fire. And
Yeah.
I think we're even with this chart in 2026, we're going to have a beautiful fire trine, Aries to Leo with Saturn and Jupiter that matches the summer of love fire trine between Saturn in the same signs, Saturn and Jupiter.
Mm,
I think this could be early planning for that for all of us. You know, what lights your fire? And what are you building even in this like few years here of this really creative moment, and what it's leading to 2026. And that these are all huge topics, I know, but
Yeah.
if this chart is triggering some of those same signs, and in a way that I think it's worth talking about, because Saturn will meet Neptune in that same degree where the sun is always during the Aries ingress.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jupiter will be right where that moon is in that chart. It's, I think, July 2026, when all of the outer planets are basically in the fourth, fifth degree of masculine signs. And so this feels like it's an early kind of preview of that. If you go to 15 July 2026, you'll see it.
July 2020, July
15
15th.
July. Yeah. And so you can see where Uranus is, where Neptune is, where Pluto is, and where Jupiter is. And so, and then the moon is with Jupiter for that 2 days. It's kicking off this, we call it a minor grand trine, but it's two minor grand trines with Neptune, Pluto, and Uranus as one of the minor grand trines, and then Jupiter, Uranus, and Neptune is the other minor grand trine. And it's all so-called masculine signs. It's like this fire. You see how where Jupiter's in the same degree as the moon in this ingress.
Yeah.
And so anyhow, I think that's the other thing. It's just for our personal astrology. I would just encourage people to think about what lights you up, and this is a good year for that.
I
Because
think,
this transits 2.5 years from there. I mean, it's only 2.5 years until
you
that
blink
chart
and
we
it's
just
going to
looked
be
at.
2026. Just,
Yep.
it'll, yeah, especially if you're adult. I swear. I'm like, I close my eyes and then 5 months go past and I'm like, what? Where time? Why are you slipping through my fingers? Why?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's good to think about in context, right? We're looking for that forethought. We're looking through for the forethought. We're moving through that past, but we're trying to take the power of the now to live the lust for life, and to come on, baby, light my fire, get into your
Yes.
doors phase,
Yes.
and see what, just sparks you, right? Because if we are at this turning point, this pivot point, and we're moving through some of the Chiron energies, which we'll be talking about here in a second. It's like, okay, like, yeah, this, I guess we could say this is sort of a threshold. It's a gateway of initiation, that we might have felt a little bit last year because we got that 29-degree, solar eclipse, but a total solar eclipse is a different flavor. Yeah. So, all right. Well,
Can I just
yeah.
add
Oh
quickly
yeah, go
that
please.
this is the only eclipse season of this Aries Libra nodal cycle that will have an eclipse in Libra and an eclipse in Aries during the same season. So in some sense, this really is the peak of that story of Aries Libra and the eclipses there, because both will be included. And I think that's a good way to think about April, or Aries season, is just, real peaks of pivots. I mean, it's not just the pivot of an ingress in Aries, but it's the eclipse season pivots. Those are always pivots. Every 6 months, there's like these fated triggers and removals and additions. So anyhow, just to underscore
No,
that, it is
I
important.
think it's important. Like I am known in my own life, maybe not online, but I'm known for taking distractions. And I just want to ask you this real quick, SJ, because it's coming to my brain, and I know you like to look ahead at stuff.
Yeah.
What do you think about, what do you think about, this could be very brief. What do you think about, and have you seen before, a skip of a solar eclipse? Because I noticed that we're not going to have a solar eclipse in Pisces. Did you notice
Yeah,
that?
I
Have you
did.
seen that before? I mean, I haven't gone back and done any research, but any thoughts on that real quick? Just for me. This is selfish for
Yeah.
me.
No, I think it's somewhat common, to be honest. So I wouldn't be as concerned about it. I mean, you may just, at least how I think about eclipses, especially with natal work, I would be less concerned that there's no solar. I mean, the lunars are there, the nodes are there, and there's going to be at these activations to a certain way. I mean, so I haven't really thought about it. I haven't done enough ephemeris research to know like if there's a mundane implication.
Yeah.
That was my short answer. But I mean,
No,
just
that's
on the
okay.
fly
I'm just,
here. Yeah.
it came in my brain and I was like, oh, let me ask him real quick while I'm thinking
I
about
just said on
this.
the fly, I mean, what is the solar? It's the more of the awareness versus the body. So maybe there's something where it's maybe not as deep or something like this. That's where you might want to go. Like no solar, well, faster. The changes are maybe faster and not as kind of long lasting.
Mm,
Ptolemy has a thing that solar eclipses, the timing around them are in years, timed in years, and lunar eclipses are timed in months,
yeah.
which fits with the sun takes a year and the moon takes a month.
Yeah.
So that might be all I would say, is that you might have some faster inversions and changes in Pisces that don't take as long or aren't as long lasting or as
Okay.
deep.
Yeah, I like that. All right. All right. Thank you for indulging my curiosity. All right. So all that being said, wow, we've been talking about it here. So we'll try, actually there's not like there's a lot of stuff going on in Aries season, but when it comes to like actual transits, there's not there's some quiet points. So we'll kind of just move through starting. So we start off the season, we've already kind of talked about this, so we don't need to reiterate it but in detail, but I will just say that we have Mercury Mercury's conjuncting Chiron. So this will actually be a two-part situation, three-part situation going on with Mercury. Well, get that note in there. Mercury meeting Chiron. We are just coming off of the Chiron North Node conjunction that happened in February. So, and the same time we have the Sun making that sextile to Pluto, which we've already talked about here. Just quickly, Mercury, Chiron, eclipse precursors. Any quick thoughts on that?
Those are my thoughts. It's a triple path conjunction. So it's whatever is triggered here will be thrice, engaged. And the peak of it all is going to be that eclipse is, in my view, it's all building to that eclipse. Now,
Yeah.
just the textbook delineation, we're talking about conversations around wounds and, in Aries. So maybe these are short expressions of, yep, I know I'm hurt, something like that. You don't need to say many words. You're just like, yep, I have a wound and I can feel it. And,
Yeah.
and it's going
Perceptually
to get triggered.
acknowledging.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. And notation, Mercury's noting. So it's like maybe bringing language to a wound for
I
the
like
first
that.
time, like one label, like I am, I'm a broken man, or just, whatever. That's probably, but, like I have, I'm sad. Like that might be the most, like I feel pain. And that just sometimes that saying that releases us to be vulnerable, just to say
Yeah.
I'm feeling pain right now. And that's like, okay, wow, this can be okay. So.
Yeah. And it can be like the integration of the mental component around, the wound or what is like deeper within us can be a very healing process. So to think that we're going to have three passes of Mercury with Chiron and all in this like eclipse season, that we're going to be eclipsed with Chiron energy. Just pay attention, as we get to this equinox and sort of what's coming into the mind, and we're going to have that Leo, that heart-centered Leo moon that's trining into it also. How do we connect with that place in ourselves? So just a little heads up. Great time to do some journaling. Do some journaling around like what your pain pulses or your triggers around things, or what's coming up for you. Because it can be very therapeutic, especially with the sun sextiling Pluto, right? Get your catharsis moment.
Yeah.
Get your catharsis.
And for sure, Mercury is great for just trying to articulate, put in people will do this sometimes. What's your elevator speech? You've heard that, where you try to get to the core expression that,
Mm.
or like a sigil is that too. I know that's mercurial, certainly
Oh
sigil
yeah.
work, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying, that's a little bit more Piscean, I think, but what is like, I know this is my goal. Okay, I want to succeed in my career, something like this. Like it's one sentence, a verb, a noun. There you go, and that might be a way to work with it. Just Mercury. This is Mercury and Aries in general.
Yeah, but it's Aries brief, right? Get in,
Brief.
get out, blunt to the
Yep.
point. Like,
Yep. Yep. Concise and edited down, and
yep.
maybe this would be about, look, a lot of us, as the longer we get into life, the more wounds we might have. And those wounds really do inform who we are, our goals. I think that's the upside of Chiron, so maybe there's something where you're like, okay, this was a pain period. these 5 years of struggle really hurt me, but now you're through that. And now it's like, now through that, I know who I am, kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. Yeah. All right. Well, then kind of move on to a Venus story, because Venus, she's doing some serious business in the skies, SJ. She is over here on Saturn on the 21st, and then she's going to move on to sextile Jupiter basically just a few days later on the 24th. So we have this actually kind of Venus bridging the gap of, still that Jupiter Saturn sextile that's in place. And obviously she's going to go on to connect with Uranus too. But I mean, Venus Saturn's always obviously a kind of a serious moment. And she has been she's been in a tricky place the last couple of years when it comes, especially around the time of the ingress that we were just talking about. So here we have this Venus Saturn signature, but in Pisces. So she's exalted, but she's also, I mean, would she get into this? What do you think about her? It breaks the bonification that you were talking about, right? Yeah.
Breaks
Thoughts?
the bonification, and Mars will join like the next day and then start applying to Saturn. So this does feel like a real shift in terms of what Venus is able to, like, we get into some darker places. That's just my thoughts pretty
Yeah.
quickly here. Like on the 22nd, when Mars and Saturn are now co-present in Pisces and applying. My thoughts on all this are, we need love. And it sounds trite and cliche, but this is there's going to be some great, deep, and profound pain. And I'm not even talking about Chiron. I'm talking about Pisces, which is a
Yes.
sign of the wellsprung of, love comes from pain. Love and pain are the same. I mean, really, when you think about it, I mean, every person I've ever loved, either and look, people die, okay, and some of the people I've loved the most deeply in this life have died, and I was wounded, and I cried deeply because I loved them so much, and so, but I wouldn't trade the love, I mean, to avoid the
Yeah.
pain, and so on the other hand, we know that when we love people, like in love relationships, I mean, we're all constantly navigating like desire and control, and hopefully we're healthy around that. We're doing it healthily, but these ideas of, we get triggered in our intimacy. I mean, that's the place where you get triggered the most, is when you
Yeah.
have deep intimacy with another person. So I think this is going to be navigating all of that. Maybe we're going to get triggered and need to bring in our, Venus to kind of as a salve somehow to help us, face whatever these triggers are going to be. And just my final thought on that, just to come back to spiritualism of Pisces, and then the Jupiter and Taurus, I think there's kind of some kind of grounding spirituality here, or maybe we want to like seek the divine, but through, maybe just as an example, like your church or something, where you have people, Jupiter in Taurus, some kind of material, tangible way to connect through these almost ineffable
Yeah.
experiences around
Hmm.
pain and love and religion and philosophy and God, so those are my thoughts there.
No, I like that. It makes me also think about just connecting through the ritual of whatever that looks like for you, which could be going to, a house of God, or sort of a spiritualist, congregation of sorts. It could be also in your own, your own altar in your own bedroom, where you're connecting with some of these spiritual principles, or this side of yourself, or, that you're trying to get and to connect with. Um, and getting in connect with sort of the calling, or the attraction, or like the Venus pulls us into something, and our pull can be, especially when it's with Saturn, it's like it's sort of this place of recommitment with what the attraction or the pull is, which we're obviously going to see in relationships. Like we can, blanket statement, we put Venus and Saturn together. It's going to test relationships. And then the ones that are, you know, going to sign on the dotted line for the next go around of a year with Venus and Saturn will continue forth. Others might find limitations that they can't get past. And then Jupiter just being immediately there afterwards with the sextile. It's like, no, it's moving forward no matter what. But what does that forward look like, right? And I think the Virgo moon too, at the same time, like we are kind of pitted in this place of like the reality and the and maybe even like the criticism versus the compassion and the unconditional love, and what's in the heart versus what's in the head. You know, there's a lot of sort of kind of push pull to me to this zone. But to get into touch with that, I want to reiterate what you were just saying about coming back to kind of this spiritual essence of that and having maybe a practice that you can lean into to really understand that part of yourself and what's being asked, regardless of what other people's influences are, the trigger that's happening. Yeah, so maybe that's just what I'll be doing, but we'll see there. So it's a hotspot moment for Venus. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's see here. What's next on our, because we're leading to, and keep in mind as we're talking about this, what are we days away from? We're days away from a lunar eclipse in Libra, ruled by who? Venus. So this is so I guess we could say this is definitely an eclipse lead up as far as Venus sending us a Saturn message, a Jupiter message, a little hot seat, moon hot seat in Virgo there. Yeah. So I think that really oh, and then we have Mars ingressing into Pisces. And I know we already kind of talked about Mars and Pisces. We did a bit of a treatment here. So I don't think we need to reiterate that, but just we're acknowledging that Mars has crossed the rainbow bridge into Pisces. And we have a different flavor. We have a more of a watery flavor. We're getting a lot of steam here, right? We got a lot of fire, we got a lot of water. It's getting steamy. It's a steam aversion. Like we don't know where the steam's coming from, but we feel it. So I really think that brings us to the eclipse. So I'm just going to take us right there. And as I take us there, SJ, I'm going to go grab Bernadette Brady's book so that I can get that Ceres cycle. So if you want to just take the lead and share what you think about just the signature right here, please do.
I'll start in on it. So I'm just going to come back to Mars in Pisces. When it ingresses into Pisces, remember it's Mars Saturn. And I think just to say a few words on Mars Saturn, everything we talked earlier about Mars and Pisces was that it's, these kind of creative, circuitous opportunities to maybe, act through more imagination. But with Saturn there, I do think that there is a sense of some blocks around that. And maybe this does lead us into like the dark imaginative, the getting lost in the dream, these kind of, there's a whole theme here around Mars with Saturn and Pisces that sort of changes the Mars and Pisces conversation. And this is present, this signature, for both eclipses, because when you come to Moon in Libra, two primary rulers, Saturn by exaltation, Venus by domicile, when you come to the solar eclipse in Aries, Mars and Pisces by domicile still applying to Saturn. So this Mars Saturn application is an important thing to plore fully symbolically, because all of the eclipse rulers are going to be there, save for the exaltation ruler of Aries, which remains in Aries. And so that's just what I would say. If you're feeling blocked or frustrated, that would just be classic Mars Saturn, blocked action that can't get unleashed, and independent of the sign it's in. And you throw Pisces in, it's like blocked because, oh, wake me up, please. You wake up from one dream and you're in that next dream. You wake up from that dream. I don't know if you've experienced that, but it's kind of tripped out when you can't really wake from dreams sometimes.
Yeah. No, I know. Or like when the dream just continues. I had one the other night where I was like, I dreamt that my partner and I moved into a new house, and it was really nice, but there was all these limitations and like, I didn't really want to live there. I was like, maybe I want to go back to this other house. And then And then I had the next dream, like, you know, like an hour later, and that dream was me telling my partner that I had the dream about the, you know, the previous dream, and I'm telling him about the dream. And then, you know, and then there was a dream that came a few hours later where we were in a different house, and I saw in the sky, I was looking into the horizon, and I saw a full moon and the sun, but they're right next to each other. And I knew that that was impossible because of the, you know, just the nature of the sun and the moon. We could never see them side by side. We'd never see the moon, right? Because it wouldn't get the reflection. And I was trying to figure it out. And I was like, is that the sun or is that Mars? Like, it was just a whole thing. But I was repeatedly stuck in the dream cycle of these themes, not trying to like just figure it out. And then when I actually woke up, I'm like, what was all that, you know? So I hear you. I hear you on that.
Yeah,
So
that's, you know, so anyhow, so that's the theme where like rulership flows to that story. And I would say that would dominate, at least that would have a big chunk of any eclipse analysis, in my view, of both eclipses and the whole eclipse season. It's just what you described so elegantly, like this idea as a metaphor for like a strong tone of what we're going to go into. Now, you come to just Libra, and we have concordance, group concordance, official rules, outward expressions. This is not a dream sign. This is a sign of the outer world and
yeah.
engaging directly with the outer world. So what do we see in October? And you have solar eclipse there, war in Palestine, Israel. So, I mean, like we're talking about agreements under pressure being broken or renegotiated, just with the Libra symbolism here. And then combined with like the dream, it's like you can't break it. What if that's like you're trying to break it, but it's so confusing and so enmeshed in the unconscious and in these deeper, you know, like traumatic reenactments of the unconscious that you can't even really, you don't even know what the agreement is. It's like some kind of soul karmic thing that you sort of can't break out of, because that's what Pisces, Mars, and Saturn are doing.
Mm.
Even though you think it's as simple as, hey, you signed this document. Well, hey, what about the last lifetime and the lifetime before and the blood, you know, promise from 3 lifetimes ago? Anyhow, I'm not seriously, I mean, I'm open to
You
past
know,
lives, but
I'm really resonating with that, SJ, actually, in my own life. I, you know, won't go into detail, but I know exactly what you're talking about, especially when you want to come together to an agreement or an accord or like make something work, especially when it comes to like a relational aspect, which doesn't have to be romantic. It can be business, it can be worldly, as we're talking
everything. Yeah.
about. But you can't, like, it's hard to come to that because there's all these spiritual implications. Because sometimes we want things to agree, we want to be on the same page, but there's just also a part of our soul and ourself that can't get there for whatever reason, you know?
Yeah.
Like, even though you try, like you give it there, but it just doesn't, like, you know, and that can be confusing. You're like, because yeah, you know, I want you know, theoretically, I want this ideal to realize itself, but why do I keep coming to this place of like maybe the automatic, that of, you know, just that's in my soul, and I can't like really get past that to come here, or you're just challenged with it to like maybe that's where the cycle breaks. It's like, you know, and it's not an easy process, but absolutely, I think what you're bringing up with thinking about the war in Palestine and that being activated during the solar eclipse in Libra, this is obviously kind of a no-brainer that we're going to see some very intense activity around that whole conflict going there, especially once Venus meets Saturn and sextiles Jupiter. That whole lead up is huge. So, you know, expect
Yeah,
that.
I was just saying, I'm really glad we're talking about this, because this is really what I find most interesting about it all, is these ideas of soul karmic, because we
Yeah.
all, you know, you're sensitive to that. I know I am. I mean, it's just part of my story right now with, and I won't go into the details, but it really is true, isn't it? It's like we have
Yeah.
these people we meet, and it's like, why am I even like, I'm not trying to meet this person. And then all of a sudden it's some deep thing that it's like, okay, this is something else, you know, whether it's just simply the synastry that is between two people, whether it is some kind of karmic explanation about past lives, whatever it is, some of these relationships are just so much deeper and there's so much more going on than meets the eye. And so anyhow, I appreciate you expressing and
Yeah. No,
articulating that,
I
because I relate to
feel
it
ya.
so deeply. I'm like, dang,
Oh,
this
I
is a
feel
heavy
you.
one.
Yeah,
So
it is, but it's I mean, that's the mystery of life and the continuum of like why we're here. And you know, I got a Pisces South Node. I definitely firmly believe that we've been here on many occasions for many different reasons. And it's all a thread, right? So, you know, what is essentially what part of that thread and that needle are we weaving right now? And like we get to decide where the needle threads, but there is all this backstory and this like karmic and spiritual implication that is part of that. And that's where the free will comes in, right? Because we're still talking about this sort of Aries component and maybe that conscientious the conscious overlord. That was what I was just thinking in my head. That is like, okay, well, I'm presenting you with this you know, cognition of what is actually happening, and you get to choose this. But do you repeat the pattern? Do you, you know, you learn from it? Do you give it space? I mean, we already talked about that in the beginning of this program, where there's this element of space. And I actually think this is the perfect time for me to read Bernadette Brady's
perfect.
Saros cycle commentary. So basically the Saros cycle, if you know anything about eclipses, they're in a much larger cycle. They repeat every 18-ish years in that same Saros cycle series, but the cycle itself is, you know, a good 1200 plus years long. And so they have these basically an eclipse, you know, Saros cycle is born under the first eclipse that it has. So it has a signature. And just for, you know, if you want to nerd out for the reference of this Libra lunar eclipse and the upcoming solar eclipse, it's in the, it started May 17th, 1501, you know, if you want to go check that out. But basically her whole blurb about it is inventiveness and flashes of genius are the hallmark of this Saros series. The individual will have intuitive leaps, insights, good ideas, visions, or vivid dreams. This newfound inspiration will pull the person away from his or her social life or relationship, thereby causing strain in the private life. This is a time when the person needs to be free, if only for a few weeks. And so if this isn't like Libra, Aries, you know, the Pisces component, the like, this is like everything sort of that we've been talking about. And so I find it very fascinating. Thoughts?
No, I think it's just a beautiful expression of, you know, needing independence for a few weeks. I mean, I recommend folks turn down during eclipse season if you can. And I would say if you're able to, you know, you might want to not take on too many commitments during this time. I started taking time off during eclipse season
Yeah.
always because I find it's good to get away, and it's good to be with the nodal energy. And just to say the nodes, you mentioned free will, you
Mm.
know, the nodal energy is some of the most powerful and potent to bring changes in terms of when it's activated. And I think that might be a good way to like take a step back, because it's hard to change when you've got people around and you've got all these
Yeah.
commitments, right? And
Mm-hmm.
sort of like say, even for a few weeks, I'm going to just step away and kind of go in, you know, again, back to the Aries questions. Who am I? What do I want? What are my commitments? What commitments do I need to renegotiate? And have more of a creating space for that if you can. Now, eclipses are
What's
always
my
so intense.
fire? That's what you were
What's
talking about. What's my fire? What's my inspiration? What's my innovation? What's my creation? You know? Yeah, I love
who am
it.
I? All of that.
Who
So
am I? Who am I? I
yeah.
don't know. I
Who am
think
I?
I
You
know.
don't
And then,
wake up. Yeah.
yeah, I know. I know. You think, well, that's the beauty of these eclipses is like one day you think you're this, and all of a sudden,
Yeah.
you know, the universe
Yeah.
kind of gives you a little slap in the face, and you're like, oh my God, who actually am I? But that's the beauty of living, right? You know, like once again, going back to the kind of the analogy of the combustible sun. It's always like bursting forth into new energy and new radiance. And so how are we renewing that vital force? So yeah, it's an interesting eclipse. It's got its pluses, it's got its challenges with Venus, Saturn, but there is that, you know, that's that bridge of Venus, Jupiter, and kind of that Uranian action. going on too, because Venus is moving to sextile Uranus. So there's a lot of room for space and change and difference, and calling back in what those agreements look like, not just with other people, but with yourself, you know. So, and then, and ultimately the sense of balance, you know, like that comes in with any Libra sort of energy. So I'm intrigued. I don't know, how you feel about it. We got a one word takeaway, one word summary or of,
I Yeah, I think it's going to be tough. I think it's going to be into the nitty gritty. The unseen will have to be confronted, and particularly in the context of relations. And
yeah.
just to say why, just one other little layer here. Look at just if you look at the seven traditional. So, and I like to. This is how I've been doing these, new moons and full moons for a while. Is I like to just do derived houses. So if you put Libra as the first house where the moon is, look where all the planets are. It's either in the eighth house of the
Mm-hmm.
shared, the serious materiality of a relationship, the seventh house of the relationship itself, or the sixth house of the daily grind of life. So it's like you're dealing with sixth and eighth themes as the primary expression of just when you look at the traditionals. And those aren't the six and house. They're amazing houses. They're necessary houses, but they're not. They're like hidden, and they're the real deal stuff that makes life go behind the scenes. And so I think we might have to be, getting into some of the nitty gritty of what we haven't talked about in terms of the functional flow of our partnerships, and that fits with the Libra symbolism too. So, just hang on. Maybe tell everybody you're not going to be around until late April, and
Yeah.
then you might save yourself. Just kidding, but it's it's just what we were talking about earlier. That's why I thought it was so profound. Karmic ties, right? That's
Yeah,
like six eighth themes
it
when you
is.
derive from the moon. And so anyhow, that's just, I would say, karmic ties. That would be my phrase. Renegotiating karmic ties,
Yeah,
something
all
like
right.
that.
Hey, I believe it. I feel it. I'm here for it. Yeah, so all right. Well, this is our precursor, right? Because we got a lunar eclipse that leads us into a solar eclipse. So just keep in mind sort of the energy. There's an apex, and then there's the, that initiation. So let us move on here. So we're coming off our eclipse. Obviously, Venus is going to make that sextile with Uranus on the 28th. So we're still kind of in this, Venus is exploring. She might need some space. She might be in the, let's try to do something different here, like break up the routine or break up the patterns, right? Like I kind of like that to some extent, thinking about like the ability to get back to that, reimagining that we're talking about. Well, let's reimagine like what life would look like if we did it this way, or if we did this, or if I didn't even do anything with you, like all this, there's just space to be free and open with what reality could look like within that sphere, or at least that's what I'm taking from it there. And really, it's so interesting because until we get to the last quarter in Capricorn, it's basically all lunar activity taking place. There's no planets, other than the moon, perfecting a aspect here. But Mercury is preparing to station retrograde, so just keep that in mind. So we see Mercury over here at the, getting to the kind of the tail end of Aries, 25 degrees. So, I mean, obviously, where I have the chart right now with March 27th, we're going to have an opposition to Mercury. So we might want to just kind of pay attention, thinking about when's the moon going to be triggering Mercury, because Mercury's got a lot of food for thought, right? Just went through an eclipse. There's a lot of things happening. We're trying to process. We go through a Scorpio moon, March 28th. March 29th. It's going to oppose Jupiter Uranus. So we're going to get a whole light up of what that looks like from the other side. So expect it to be a very emotional period because all the energy is, emotionally driven here. We get to Sagittarius moon, and really we get to this place of Mercury stationing on April Fool's Day. How about that
Yeah.
joke?
Yeah. Wow,
Yeah.
that's going to be a fun April Fool's Day. Wow,
I
a
know. I
lot
wonder,
of
I'm like,
trickery.
who's gonna play what here? So I'm just gonna get Mercury exact. So Mercury, April 1st, 6:14 p.m. Eastern here. So I know we talked a little bit about Mercury retrograde. Is there anything we'd like to add in this moment, SJ? Anything? We got the last quarter moon in Capricorn, an interesting turning point with the moon cycle here.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a turning point. It's you know, it's squaring the lunar nodes now. And so you got the first cardinal moon in between two cardinal eclipses. So I look for this to be a accentuation of the eclipse stories,
Yeah.
and a kind of a local re-intensification. And then with the Mercury station direct in the same day, I mean, blocks, delays. I mean, my theme is stay away from activity in between eclipses. Just let it kind of let them run their course. But with a Mercury retrograde station, it's definitely do that on particularly the day 2 or 3 or 4 around the retrograde station of Mercury. That's when it's the hottest. I've seen it over and over and over again for like cell phone breaks, things break down. So I wouldn't be traveling during this. I wouldn't be taking any kind of high risk digital or information or tech based thing. I wouldn't be buying new computers. I mean, just the basic Mercury
Yeah,
retrograde stuff.
just your bit, but then like a little bit on steroids too, just because we're in the eclipse season here. So it's
Yeah.
just like if you can
And
kind of bow down, and Aries is excitable, right? You get an idea and you're like, oh yeah, let's just go for it. But they're like, yeah, especially if you're inspired at this time, let the inspiration sink in, give it a hot second because Cardinal wants to act and it's like, yeah, let's go do this. Or like, let me, Capricorn moon, let me act in a way that like makes it material. That's money's involved or that, productivity or energy. And this whole Mercury retrograde, cycle is basically seated under this Mars Saturn conjunction forming. So yeah, like what SJ just said, this is all about, some delays, obstacles, patience, hanging back. Um, yeah, because otherwise you're just going to be frustrated or you're going to start something that you're not going to want to finish or that you could get yourself in like a heap of a mess with, for whatever reason, that you can't see. When we talk about once again, that sort of that aversion quality that's going on.
yeah,
So
everything, just everything, like, yeah, getting into the nitty gritty here. It's like, oh, just to repeat, not too much, but like can't wake up from a dream, Saturn and Mars and Pisces, that's blocking. Moon squaring the lunar nodes, that's like corrupting. And so Mercury and Aries being ruled by Mars here, the moon being ruled by Saturn, this is just not for these other layers, as you mentioned. I stay out of your
yeah.
checkbook. Does this happen to you? It seems like every time around Mercury retrograde, or sometimes, not every time, but I'm like, I want to go buy something. It can kind of trigger desires to buy, and I do think that would be worth noting if you have this kind of initiatory energy, like you just mentioned, to just wait until after eclipse season. Wait till
Yeah.
Mars and Venus get strong
Yeah.
in May. Like there's no rush, and hopefully no rush. So
Well, yeah, sometimes the universe does rush
yeah,
us and we're like in a rock and a hard place and we have to
yeah,
make a decision. So if you're there and you have to do that, like, what have you. But if you're not there, I think the motto that we are basically putting out to you is don't do it. Don't do it. Whatever it is, don't do it. Don't do it now. Let's say that. Don't do it now.
no, do it now.
Don't do it now. All right. So we got Mercury stationing. We're moving past the last quarter of Capricorn. Venus, she's on her own story over here, and she's getting ever closer to old Neptune, which is talk about a dream within a dream that you were talking about. So just to kind of give a little context of what we're leading up to with the total solar eclipse that is coming on the 8th of April. We're about a week out there. But so we got kind of a Venus story going on. She's going to conjunct Neptune. She's going to move into Aries and she's going to sextile Pluto, while we also have the sun moving to conjunct the North Node during this time. So let's think about and keep in mind we're in balsamic phase, so we're closing down. This is more internalized energy, even more reinforcing what SJ and I were just saying about, like go within, take your time. And so Venus Neptune, gosh, this is another one of those transits where it definitely has its pluses and it can have its minuses. To one extent, we could be like laid out on the couch enjoying a good movie, and then on the other end, we could be crying over lost love. Like it's hard to, or maybe we're doing both at the same time. It is double bodied. So, any thoughts on Venus Neptune?
Yeah, I mean, the releasing into the, create. It's like the 2001: A Space Odyssey, the scene at the end where he enters into this state of like a portal, that, and it's like the colors and it's
Mm-hmm.
strange and it just it's like where am I? Who am I? I think that gets majorly intensified by
Mm.
this time. And the dreamy dissipation of Neptune, I think it'll be beautiful. I think this is one of the more beautiful Piscean peaks during this whole Piscean eclipse season. So maybe by this time we're like, it's the
Oh, we lost SJ here. We'll
peak
see.
in those
There we go.
experiences and where it gets very profound. So where you peak and it gets profound, creatively
Mm.
profound during these psychedelic experiences, and that to me feels like at least one opportunity for that, given everything we're going through and how challenging I think this whole cycle is going to be. So I would be thinking about it more of like this might be when you want to get on your knees and do the prayer where you feel I could
Yeah.
feel God in the room, and I don't know really what happened quite, but I felt I lost my ego loss, and the
Mm.
benefits of ego loss in terms of what appears to be really tough factual unfoldment for the rest of this time. I mean, it's not there's a high likelihood, in my view, that some of us are going to be going through some tough stuff. Mars,
Yeah.
Saturn, Mercury
Yeah.
retrograde, eclipses, and this might be the time when you're like, crying out to the divine, or that. I was talking about this recently. Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump. Did you see that movie where he's on the ship in the middle of the storm on the sea, and that's where he finally like yells at God, like and prays and has his come to God moment. And then
Mm.
after that, his character in the movie is sort of settled, but that was the moment of the divine connection.
Oh
And they
no,
don't know
I
if he's
didn't
going to
get
live or
that.
die. They don't know if he's going to live or die. I mean, he's just so, anyhow, some ideas
Wow.
on it.
I got chills when you
Um,
said that. Like that's
yeah,
yeah. No, it's a profound experience, especially since what we're kind of what's put in front of us, especially with Mars and Saturn, when you feel the blockages or the weight of life or things just getting your way, like there sometimes could only be that moment where you cry out to something larger than yourself to just express, connect with me, send me a message, help me, help me get through this, help me to find my faith, um, and
yeah,
yeah, and sometimes we just need that once again as kind of spiritual beings, as karmic beings, going through an identity crisis, which can absolutely be a thing right now for different reasons. Sun's getting close to the
yeah,
North Node. We're trying to find that path forward, trying to find our way, and you're finding your way through the dark or through the fog or through the labyrinth. And so what can you call upon? You can call upon your spiritual practice. You can call upon your intuition. You can call upon your creativity to release the notion of what the blockage is. Because if we stay into blockage or depression for too long, it's like that's what will pull you into the undertow. But when you're able to imagine and create and realize that there is this boundless sense of what could be, when we're mired in what is, or what's closing, right? Mars Saturn is closing in this cycle yet. It hasn't turned over. So there can be a profound sense of separation and difficulty and so yeah. So it's
yeah.
it's an interesting beauty, SJ. It's absolutely beautiful to get you to that ripe core of your like spiritual essence. But what gets you there, as you said, can be
Yeah.
difficult.
Just a final quick thought, like if you've ever been on the therapist couch just bawling, I have a few times in my life. I wish I could do it every day, because when you come out from that, like a deep cry of like deep and profound grief, it really does change everything about
Yeah.
how you experience the world. Like literally, it's like before that release of grief and after. And it's some of the most yeah, feeling the most alive when the pain releases into like the tears. And that's very Neptune. If you've ever cried like for an hour, like 30 minutes, where you just lose a sense of time, that you're so in the throes of the tears and the grieving and the weeping, that's like a Neptune release. So anyhow,
Mm.
not to get some people out there will have had that experience, I know. And
Oh, I'm
yeah,
sure many people have had that
yeah,
experience, whether they want to admit it or not.
yeah, yeah,
Many people. It's just human. It's just the
yeah, yeah,
nature
yeah,
of, being human.
yeah.
And so we're gonna have that moment right after Mercury goes retrograde, April 2nd. Yeah. And then so basically then Venus crosses the threshold into Aries about the same time that the sun meets the North Node. So we just added to our Aries party, right? So technically, where's my notes here? Venus, oh, I didn't write that. So basically, April 4th. April 4th, she's going to move in, and then the sun will conjunct the North Node that day. So Venus and Aries.
Just to go along with this kind of tale we're constructing, which is, the eclipse is like karmic ties renegotiating. I think that was the phrase.
Mm-hmm.
Then the Venus Neptune is like the cathartic cry. Venus and Aries to me feels like the breakup. And and I don't mean like or that's kind of sounds dramatic, because most of the time these aren't breakups, but like this is like the implementation of the renegotiation. And it might not feel good. I mean, a lot of times it doesn't feel good when you're in those early phases of like, all right, this is the new boundary, and someone is having to adjust. Someone is going to have to adjust
Someone.
to that.
Yeah.
Now one might be more comfortable, but one will have to be in a place where it probably doesn't feel good in the relation. And so that's what I would say. I mean, by the time Venus gets here, this is like the shocking awake, the kind of new world. I mean, this is why Mars and Venus combinations can be so tough, because it's not at this time about Venus being unified and comfortable. This is a Venus that's like, no, now you're in a new it's like Venus has to become adjusted to the what's newly been initiated. And I think a lot of times Venus is about settling in after that. So Taurus is after Aries. It's like
Yeah.
it's like the comfort of the groove. And then, Libra can be initiations, but it's often for the purpose of group dynamics. This is not about group dynamics and Aries. So that's just what I see in terms of the flow of what we've been constructing here, is like the
Yeah.
rude awakening.
Yeah, and it makes sense because all of a sudden, Venus crosses over, she's in detriment, she's now under the domain of Mars. Mars is moving to Saturn, like she's not her own player at this point, she's maybe forced by the hand of Mars and whatever that looks like. But Mars's hand is forced also because there's just the Saturnian nature of the boundary or the limitation, or just the long term of how we think things are unfolding, or just sometimes the depression of it. Like sometimes it's just people going through things, and maybe Venus has to go do her own thing while Mars is like, I got some shit to get through right now. Like, I don't know what it is, but or maybe I do. And then Mars, has to look to that Jupiter, Uranus, so there's this whole sort of, chain of command happening with Venus to Mars to then Jupiter and then back to Venus. So, oh, that's an interesting little moon phase. So we're ping-ponging from this zone. And it's like SJ said, it's just going to be uncomfortable. We got a Pisces moon at the same time, balsamic, rolling over Mars, rolling over Saturn, rolling over Neptune, rolling over Venus until we get to our solar eclipse. Like it's a heck of a lead up, especially, April 5th, 6th, 7th, leading to the eclipse.
Boy. seeing it like
Lord.
this is
I
just, I mean,
know.
I'm glad that we got to talk today, because my eclipse prep is now shifting to take it a little bit more, just, seeing like the Mercury retrograde with that Capricorn moon, and then now Venus and Aries with the moon with Mars, and that's not easy. And let's hope it can be easy. Look, it doesn't have to be hard for anybody out there, but if it does turn hard, you've got an astrological explanation. Uh,
Thank you. Yes. Context is everything when we're going through life's WTFs, like just back to that, kind of that, the cliche of this too will pass, right? And what were you saying earlier, SJ? Life always
Life
finds a
finds a
way.
way.
Yeah. So it's kind of like the combination of those two and just being in that eclipse vortex. And it pulls, and I'm going to butcher this because I can't remember exactly how it goes, but it is like a Buddhist philosophy and a particular type of Buddhist tradition where they're very adamant about the thoughts, especially on a solar eclipse, of where your mind and your intention is and your thoughts are during a solar eclipse, because they magnify by 100,000 times. And
Mm.
so having context of what's going on in life and being able to kind of sit with that, but not sit with its negativity, but sit with its potentiality. Because if we're kind of coming into this like magnetized space of intention, uh, it's just good to be aware, I guess is what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
So let's roll on over. Let's roll on over to our eclipse here, April 8th, 2:20 p.m. Eastern. We already kind of mentioned it verbally, but you'll be able to definitely see it here. We see our Chiron. Yeah, now Chiron's making a whole lot of sense, isn't it? As we
Making a whole lot of
lead
sense.
up,
Yeah.
I know. So that's interesting to think about. What do we got? It's hard to see that up close, but is that so we have the eclipse in the bounds of Mercury, right? By seeing, yeah, that's what's going on.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about that in regards to where Mercury is right there. We've talked a lot about the eclipse already, obviously. Obviously, we see the Chiron piece. We know that it is ruled by this Mars conjunct Saturn. God, could the universe is up there going.
Mm.
We can't ignore, Jupiter
No.
conjunct Uranus over here. And I mean, I don't know if you work with Ceres at all. I mean, I know you
I do
did.
some.
Like, it is interesting to see Ceres at the, kind of the bending here and squaring this whole zone too.
It is.
So, but what we haven't said yet already, SJ, any what fires out for you here?
I mean, I will say, if we come back to this derived houses story,
Mm,
and now you shift, and now you're dealing with the 12th house and the
yeah.
second house. But these are houses that are a little bit more self-oriented, in the sense of, it's like, if you look at each it's not a cardinal house, boy, I'm not a succeedant, mutable,
Mm-hmm.
succeedant houses, cadent
Cadent
houses,
houses.
and what's the angular houses? Sorry.
Yeah.
You have a triad. There's a triad of houses. And so, like, the first house, the 12th house, and the second are one triad, and then the fourth, third, and fifth. And you see how that can work with just like the house theory of the triads of houses. And I think this triad it's certainly about survival, right? With the first and second, this is very much
Mm,
survival. The 12th house is what we're born, what we went through to be born. So this is like the labor and any kind of birthing process. So I just come back to like the survival. By this time, I think survival would be my key. I'm like, I'll go right to my keyword for this one, but it's like the karmic renegotiations. And now we're like having to kind of survive in the wake of, maybe digesting the grief process, the deeper and profound separations, the reviews of Mercury retrograde. I think the karmic wound, like, the renegotiation happens, and now we're left with, wow, this is my deep wound I've carried for lifetimes, and how profound that is to even get an opportunity to a window into that awareness, and that might be one of that's like the upside of this moment, I think, symbolically. It's like,
Well,
you know,
no,
go
that's
ahead, go ahead.
interesting what you're saying though, just because when I think of Mars and Saturn together, like this is an invitation to do the work. So like if that's going to come up and that's going to present itself, do you want to keep carrying the wound? Do you want to keep the Chiron, theme going, or do you want to do the spiritual work that is being presented to you? And it's not hard, it's not easy, it's not comfortable. I mean, it's not hard, it is hard. It's not easy, it's not comfortable. um it pings you in a place that is your eternal self, like it's not just your egoic self living this life, it's like the eternal self that has felt this on so many occasions. And here it is presented to you on a silver platter, the luminaries eclipse, and it's like, oh, here's your stuff. What are you gonna do about it?
Yeah. And like the stuff I couldn't see, like second and 12, not seeing the
Yeah.
first, and even Pisces, and I go back to Neptune and that whole Neptune Venus moment we had,
Mm-hmm.
and the conversations about like like this, when you were sharing about your dream, I was like, dreams within the dreams, and then you shared about like 3 or 4 dreams that you would have had recently. I'm like, dang, I think that's the kind of the best sense here, like what can't we see about ourselves, and then what maybe are we now seeing for the first time? Like that's the 12th house awareness, where it's like, oh wow, this is my burden. And then, as you're saying, it's a real opportunity here to like face our deep issues, basically. And I would caution against drugs and alcohol. I'll just be
Yes.
honest. I
Yes.
wouldn't be getting high and drunk if that's something you normally do. And I would try to be wary of that. And we all, like, I don't drink drugs or do alcohol. I don't drink. I guess you can drink some drugs, but I don't anymore. But we all have our drugs. We all
Yeah,
have our
yeah.
ways to get high.
It's addiction. It doesn't even have to be an ingestion. Like it could be, some sort of a form of, addiction that's even down to something that we don't think is addiction, and we check out and spend 10 hours on a couch watching Netflix. It's
Yep.
like
No.
there's many forms of it.
I think that's a big part of this eclipse, and because it's the Aries Pisces, and by the way, Saturn and Neptune, as they cross that bridge in 2026 and
Mm,
2025, I think there's a real collective shift here out of the social media age, which began with Neptune in 2012, 2011. It came to Pisces, and you've seen the rise of social media, the omnipresence of the cell phone that really has been timed with Neptune and Pisces. And I think it's a perfect example of like the Piscean addictions that we're maybe not even aware of yet, how deeply we've all been impacted by being on like X, Twitter, and Instagram for every free hour,
yeah, every
Um,
free minute
so
almost,
every,
you don't have that space to yourself. You can't deal with
no,
yourself. You don't
no,
might not realize you can't deal with yourself, but it's like, let me just throw into everything of the collective conscious around me. People I know, people I don't know, the natural world, animals, like throw something at me that doesn't allow me to sit with myself.
no. And by the way, I've been feeling this a lot, even in the last few days, or just like last week or so. It's just like the kind of maybe vacuity, or the sort of getting lost on the socials, and how basically, do I really want to be doing that? What do I really want to be doing? And I think there'll be grieving for a lot of us, maybe even wasted years. I mean, every month my cell phone sends me the hours I've spent on apps. And
Mm,
like, I don't watch it every month, but like I've seen some in like the past few months. I'm like, this is like wasting my life. What the hell am I doing?
yeah.
And so I think and that's a wound that hurts, actually, when you really process that, the wasted time, that's like deeply painful, actually. And so I think that might be some of this Chiron, Pisces, first, 12th, and then even it brings that Jupiter into Taurus energy of excess, and trying to like satisfy something. Like, what resources do we really need? Do we really need that to be resourced? Do I really need to look at Instagram? So anyhow, that's
Yeah,
just
no,
one
I
layer
feel you.
here, but
I
yeah.
feel you on all that. I feel you on that. Before we move on from this, I mean, thoughts on Ceres square in here.
I haven't, my brief work with it has been more with astrologer. Let's see. Let me see if I can remember his name right now. I can't, it'll come to me, and you may know him, but he's an expert in astrocartography. He's on X Twitter. I've interacted with him a few times. He's been around for a long, long time. And he calls it the third benefic in his astrocartography work. He's like hugely bullish on it. And he ran Moses Saragar.
Mm.
I just like Ceres as the harvest and the lunar and like more maternal lunar harvest stuff. Energy is how I delineate it. And Capricorn, I'm wondering if it's about going back to survival as the key word, and we're kind of realizing what actually is the harvest and what isn't. Like, so separating wheat from the chaff, if we want to talk
Mm.
about martial separation as an exaltation lord of Capricorn. So that's what I would just say about it. Maybe we're going to like clear out what we don't need. If it's 10th from the new moon, maybe it's like understanding exactly what we need to like toughen up, to like move into what we're here to do, and like where the true harvest can come from with some of this clarity, like facing our pain and obstacles and our wounds, so we can sort of move forward with our true purpose, something like this. And
Yeah.
the true harvest, you might say,
The true harvest, the true nourishment, she's also like a mother figure in that sense too. And what's interesting looking at the chart, SJ, is that it is sort of the thing that bridges the gap of the, aversion space of the second and the 12th, because Ceres is, sextiling the Pisces, it's trining the Taurus, it's challenging the Aries, but it's sort of, if we look at it as, I mean, obviously it's not a moon figure, but if we look at it sort of as that nurturing, like kind of mother-like space, that greater moon, maybe I'm stretching here, but I'm gonna throw it out there. We know the moon translates light, right? I mean, that's kind of the bridger of the energies. So to see Ceres sort of in this place to like bridge all the, the side-by-side action, it's just interesting to think about, and her being, under the domain of that Saturn Mars. That Saturn Mars piece is so huge in this chart. So, get in touch. If you're not already getting in touch with your Pisces, you will be now, in that area of life, and that, house, etc. But yeah, it's a whopper. It's a whopper.
It's a whopper. Ceres is the fastest moving dwarf planet, so that's also kind of lunar, because if you just look at dwarfs only, so Pluto, Ceres, Make, Haumea, and Eris, those are the five that are official right now. Ceres is the fastest when it moves very, very fast here. So that I liked your lunar connection. I think there is something to be said about that. Real quick, Melissa, do you mind if I just step away for a minute? I'll come right back.
Oh,
Pardon
not
me.
it.
Okay.
Not at all. We'll
You can.
pause and we'll be right back.
Okay, thanks.
All right, we are back from our quick break. The solar eclipse took us out for a second. It's like that's what happens with with eclipses. We just had a brief blip. But we were talking about Ceres, and we're going to move on from the solar eclipse here in a second. But I do want to just kind of point out just past Ceres connections with eclipses, and not like I'm tracking Ceres all the time. I'm just gonna be real with you, but I do remember it being very integral in the Capricorn eclipses back in 2020. So
Yes.
so here we see Ceres back in this position, right? Because it was conjunct. It was in the same, same zone. So I guess let's just have a little context, keep that awareness. I don't know if you want to expand on that anymore, or we'll just sit with it. But yeah.
No, I do want to just say, I mean, it is important because this is the first time it's here since 2020, right? I mean, this hasn't been in, or has it? Is this the second cycle through? I think it's the first time it's been back, is my guess. And
let's see. Continue
yeah,
on and I'll find out.
Okay, but it's important with it, because if it is the first time that it's back, which I'm somewhat thinking that that's true. This is the first eclipse cycle.
Yes, you're right.
It's the cardinal eclipses that are the first cardinal eclipses since 2020. And so you've got a major timing piece that Ceres is also confirming, but it's this larger point about cardinal eclipse cycles that we're looking at initiations in our reality, major initiations in 2020, 2019, with obviously COVID crisis was a huge deal, changed the whole world, right as those cardinal eclipses were done,
Yeah.
finishing out. And Ceres in a cardinal sign
Well,
in
especially
Capricorn.
resource speaking, right? Like when we talk about the food and there's kind of scrambled stuff, to how it changed the whole jobs, right? We're coming back to this place of changing the whole nature of production and jobs, and yeah.
The Zoom world. I mean, it really revolutionized reality. And you don't even have to talk about it itself, but all of the ramifications, as you mentioned, the inflation, all of it. And so, like, the Zoom world is what I call it. It was part of Saturn in Aquarius and Jupiter in Aquarius too. But so now we're back to initiations with cardinal eclipses, but then this Ceres back in Capricorn. I think it just underscores what it does for me is it underscores the intensity of an election year. It underscores maybe even, just that this is a really hot, big year, and it feels kind of tame so far. Melissa, I don't know if, like, for me, it's like 2020.
Well,
It's
yeah,
like,
I mean,
I've
sort
been
of.
waiting. Yeah, sort of. But I mean, just like there's been stuff happening, but there hasn't been like, okay, something as big as COVID. Not that it would have to be that, but even like, Trump's election in 2016, that was huge, just like to experience that, or the war last October, the war kicking off in Palestine, that was big. So, but
Yeah.
like here in 2024, there hasn't quite been something yet. And I think that this is going to kick off something
Oh,
where we're like,
yeah.
okay, we're now locked in, we're strapped in. It's like that ride in an amusement park where we're like, it's that first thing where you're
You
dropped and
drop and you're like, they're all
yeah,
taking a picture of us with their arms up, and we're
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
oh my goodness. Well, we just might also be a little worn out, like the beginning of this year. It's like, we're just we're sort of in that. That's why I was once again calling Pisces season the spiritual washing machine. Like you're in the spin cycle. Like it's hard to like we're in prep mode for what this looks like. But I absolutely think you're correct, and with this being that big pivot point, obviously, especially in America, it's a total solar eclipse that rivals the 2017. Like we can't, it's the X marks the spot, especially if you're at the X. Like we'll pay attention to the kind of Midwestern states and what have you. But I'd look at Ceres there, and it really the message beat home in the conjunctions in 2020 of those eclipses about how the system is broken or doesn't work for us, or the whole nature of COVID allowing us to come to those realizations as we see, the entirety of the system of the global structure sort of like break down and scramble for other reasons. And so now we're back again, and we're like, how does the system nurture us in a very, simple way? And we know it doesn't. And so what do we do about that? Where's the progress? Where's the innovation? Where's the pioneering to what could be or what's next? This is where Aries challenges us, but it brings up the core wound of the societal wound, our part of. I always talk about this with Aries energy and Chiron in specific. It's like, where are our actions and our parts in the entirety of the whole? Because we can complain about the whole all we want, but we're all individuals making up this whole. So how are we contributing? How are we changing? What are we doing to, as a part of this?
Yeah, and I mean, we're kind of back to where we started. That's a cool thing about this month, this whole period, and we've actually been in this for a while now, except the Aries stuff starts hitting in 11 March, when Mercury enters. But basically, this higher level theme of the whole period, self interconnection, maverickism, but yet we're tethered to the whole, and this like Pisces Aries tension because they're reversed, but at the same time, there's also, I mean, the whole of the zodiac is all interconnected, and there's a purpose and a reason for every symbol as it relates to other symbols. There's always kind of what's the upside of this aversion, and these are also in they're connected by, oh, I'm blanking here, my mind's kind of fading, but we're in two
Mercury is in
signs.
Pisces, so it's cool.
Yeah. But you have the connection between degrees around the equinox points because it's the same distance from the equinox points.
Oh,
And
Antisha?
Antisha, exactly. So there's an antishal relationship with Pisces and Aries, and that might tell us
Mm,
something like, we need our powerful selfhood, maverick initiation identity, but we also need the acknowledgement of this greater collective, spiritual, interconnected, material and spiritual interconnectedness. And I do think that's a great, just what you said there. It's the Pisces Aries relationship that brings that in too, just as much as like the Ceres Capricorn. And
yeah.
Capricorn, and Cancer are like the most profound signs in my view, because there's so many ruling planets of Capricorn and Cancer, and it's like the Pima Mundi as Cancer rising. Capricorn and Cancer are just like, when you start talking about Capricorn activation, you're talking about these really profound, deep structure of the mother matrix. Like Cancer, Capricorn is like the deep material undergirding of the mother matrix kind of energy.
Oh, I
And
feel it.
and
Yeah.
yeah, so I think that's, I just want to say, I just saying here, just because I think that's a big theme here. We are interconnected to each other, like at every level, ultimately. And this Pisces, you were saying it was your Pisces season theme, but I mean, we're still in that washing machine, because look where Mars and Saturn
Yeah.
are. Look at
Maybe
them.
this is actually when the spin
You know,
cycle happens, once Mars
yeah,
gets in there and we're like, ah, yeah.
yeah.
Trying to get the excess water out, but it's a little volatile and we're going around in circles and yeah, no, that's funny. But if you can't laugh at it, you just got to be able, that's the one thing. So we go through all these times. It's like, find the humor, find the absurdity, find the like, because being overly serious is not gonna help anything. But yeah. So whew, all right. Well, I think we did our treatment to the solar eclipse. So we can kind of carry on because we're not done with Aries season yet. But actually
Can
we're
I
gonna
just say
get to the Cancer part. Oh yeah, go ahead.
just one quick final thought. I mean, it's just worth noting from a
I
mundane quick, it's the crisscrossing through the eclipse from 2023, the Libra eclipse in October, and it was visible in Texas. And then this eclipse is visible through, it's the crisscrossing points through Texas.
Yeah.
And there's the border, migrant crisis that has
Yes, we were going
been
to tell you about
timed.
that.
Yeah. So just look for that in your headlines. If you're some kind of major thing of like new chapter in that, during here in like late March and into April, it's astrology. So I just wanted, just for
No,
thoroughness, to make sure we threw that in.
absolutely. And I think we could even like kind of piggyback on bringing that up and just continuing on with the next thing to perfect basically on the 10th is Mars and Saturn. And so we're thinking about, Saturn, we're thinking about boundaries, we're thinking about borders. Pisces is a little porous. But there's also the Jupiter Uranus conjunction that is about to perfect here. So there's there we have like the forward momentum, and maybe even judicious momentum that is maybe a little some sort of like innovation, but it can also be some sort, well, I mean, it's going to be a change, right? Like there's going to be some kind of sudden change. And what actually, I think it's worth sharing what you were telling me when we were talking before the program about like the effect, what you were telling me about New York and what was going on with the mayor in relation to people coming in. I don't know if you want to share that with
Sure.
the audience.
Yeah, sure. And just a larger context. So this is Texas is where a lot of people are coming in. The big wars, the big conflict over the migrant crisis politically has been Texas and the governor of Texas versus the feds. Texas has been first, they put up, they're erecting their own barriers, and then the feds would remove those barriers.
Mm,
Then Texas passed a law that said, this is the most recent version of it, but they passed a law that said it's a new criminal law in Texas criminal code that would allow for police to arrest the migrants. And then the federal government has now in court been fighting that law. Just today, I saw a lower court upheld it. So, and then Texas was also, they would, when the migrants came in, would bus them to sanctuary cities or other places that were, I think they were busing them a lot of times to where migrants wanted to go, and many wanted to go to New York and Chicago. It wasn't just like, let's push them to the same sanctuary cities, but I think part of the reason why a lot of migrants wanted to go, because those cities were like, hey, our policy is to, for example, in New York, like a lot of the hotels, they were kind of rented out by the government to house migrants. So there was policies in New York, for example, we just stay on New York, that was very migrant friendly. There was even talk that the mayor was going to, as part of their cost efficiency program, and they were going to get debit cards, and so a lot of people went there with a certain amount on it. I'm not saying it's like they're living like kings, but rather than trying to pay an outside company to manage the food, for example, they were just going to give them debit cards to buy their own food.
Support for their survival.
Yeah, support for their
Simple
survival.
as that.
Exactly. I mean, without even trying, like, that's a good, we want to help each other. But anyhow, so that the problem is that there was so many coming in, and this is where the story is interesting. The crisscrossing eclipse is right at the border, and this is now, I mean, it's millions upon millions, records every month are coming. And these cities have been overburdened with the supporting for the survival. I mean, just to go back to that. And so that mayor of New York, Adams, had banned, I think he was sanctioning somehow, I have to get into the nitty gritty, but basically punishing these bus companies that were participating in the bringing of migrants to New York because they were so overloaded in terms of the available resources. And so it's a real crisis. I mean, that's a good word for it, because it is a crisis, and there needs to be, for everyone. And again, for me, for my personal politics, look, these borders, come get a better life. I mean, that's what people, they leave places to find a better life, and you can't really judge them.
It's been the American dream. That's the whole reason.
Yeah.
There's
But
no
I think
fault
you can
there.
blame the government, right? I mean, the government needs to either have a better container to receive these people, or to do some Mars Saturn stuff, right? Like, okay, do something where it's just done in a way that's more sustainable, basically. And that's where I see this Mars Saturn coming in. Where, what if this is about like the Texas? It's just more militarized, or somehow Mars comes in and it stops the flow temporarily, or like this provides like an attempt to block that porousness, or somehow, Mars is doing and making, and so I think adding that here, maybe there will be some policy shifts, and even like the Biden administration, that they've been talking about different policy shifts. It's certainly in the crosshairs as a major political issue.
Yes.
And I think this astrology, at a minimum, says look for those headlines to appear in your on a screen near you. So
honestly, and if you choose to look at it or not, if you got the bandwidth. It makes me think of when you're just talking about, there's always been jokes of the rogueness of Texas and wanting to break off, be its own thing. It's like it'd be interesting to look at the chart of of Texas as a state. Just to see maybe some of the overlapping. I'll have to make a note for myself to do that and see the Aries implications, right? Because Aries is going to, go rogue, or pioneer, a new path, and Jupiter, Uranus together, it's especially land, and we think about the division of back to the Aries Ingress with Mars on the IC. And then Saturn ruling the third and the fourth, when you're talking about the transportation and thinking about all this stuff was coming into my head. So not to say that Texas is all of a sudden going to break off and then we're going to have this thing, but it's just hearing the back and forth of what you were just describing. That's a battle. Where's that? Where's that end? How is that resolved? So stay tuned, but definitely a worthwhile mention. I know not all of you listeners are in the United States, but the borders are a hot topic anywhere in the world. So it's we can watch all borders at this time, but we were just looking at the Texas one here. So,
and just one more throw in there, Uranus and Gemini, it's the Civil War transit. So I mean, it's that's the context for this too. If there is going to be, I don't think it'll be a kinetic civil war in America, but there's the movie coming out called I think it's called Civil War. It's by a really artistic director. I think Alex Garland is his name. Or is it? There's one or two that I always confuse, but basically there's it could be these legal battles. We're already seeing legal battles, and we're already capturing Uranus and Gemini before it's entered. So it's just worth mentioning, as you say, Texas versus the feds, Mars on the IC, and the Aries Ingress. how might the Texas versus Fed story be expanded and altered this year? I think Uranus enters Gemini after the next Aries ingress, not this Aries ingress. So we'd have to check out that chart. Maybe it'll be like Mars, Pluto. Oh, you said Pluto on the ascendant already
I
for
know, Pluto on
2020.
the ascendant, spoiler
Yeah.
alert, Pluto on the ascendant, Aquarius for the next Aries ingress. That's all I looked at. We looked at it like super quick because
Yeah.
I had it on the wrong chart and I saw that. I was like, no.
Revolution.
Yeah,
Aquarius
there's
revolution. Yeah.
oh my goodness.
So
All
anyway,
right. Stay in the present, SJ. Stay in
yeah.
the present. We're
Okay.
in the
Okay. Where's my Eckhart Tolle? Let me get
I
back to
know.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We're all breaking out at Tolle right now. All right, so we're gonna move past Mars and Saturn because we have touched on this on many different angles throughout the program. But this really brings us to excuse me, the Mercury Sun conjunction where we have the the inferior Cazimi taking place on April 11th, and it will coincide with that's going to be at 22 degrees of Aries, and then basically Mercury is going to move on to make its second pass with Chiron on the 15th. So we have sort of this rebirth. Mercury is going to take a message from the sun, going to start its cycle over, and then going to immediately move on to Chiron. But thoughts about this inferior conjunction, especially so quickly after the eclipse, with the moon in Gemini, no less, at the same time. We got this connection going on. But yeah,
Yeah. I think
thoughts.
we're just coming out of it now. I think we may be now seeing, I mean, one definition for the end of eclipse season is when the moon moves into the sign of the final eclipse. So that will have happened with that moon in Jupiter, moon Jupiter moment that triggers Jupiter Uranus.
Mhm.
So that's a whole nother thing. But
Oh yeah,
by
that's
this
true.
time,
That actually, just FYI, what he was
okay.
just saying there, April 10th, when we have Mars, Saturn, it is very important to note that we have that moon Jupiter Uranus conjunction at the same time, right before we're going to get this Jupiter Uranus conjunction. And I will also say that one of my besties is having a C-section on this day and her baby's being born. And I was like,
Wow.
oh, I cannot wait to meet this child. Like,
Wow.
woo,
The
I'm like, what
Taurus
a day to be
rising. Yeah.
born. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
So
if
anyways.
it's during the day, is it morning, or do you know
Oh yeah,
where this?
yeah. It'll be a
So it
morning.
could
It's going I don't know if
Taurus
I
or
have the
Gemini rising,
time.
right?
I
I mean, because
Yeah.
that would be
Or
the
she
sun.
might be Cancer. I'm gonna double
Okay.
check on that. Not like I'll be
Okay.
able to share it with all y'all right now, but
Yeah. Yeah. No,
yeah.
I just from a natal perspective, it's like, where are you going to get the sextile with Mars,
Exactly.
Saturn,
Where
and
you gonna
Moon,
get it?
Jupiter, Uranus? So that's like above the horizon stuff. That baby would seem to, maybe there's like a lot of activity in their career or in their outer world
Yeah.
engagement. That's kind of cool. But um,
What a
yeah,
day
no,
to
I
be
mean, look,
born.
yeah, it just
Yeah.
triggers, this sextile. This is an amazing sextile. It's been amazing for a long time, Saturn, Jupiter. And now we get these outer planets and Mars triggering it all. So we're really talking about like stock market highs here. I'm really curious to see what this does with the peaks here in the stock market. You're talking about the Bitcoin halving. I don't know how deep people are into that, but basically the algorithms that run Bitcoin do something special every 4 years that cuts the supply. So that feels
Mm.
like a major exuberant period where you see it's, I think it's 5 days. It's like actually a week later, but so this is leading up to that. Um,
Well, and I just
Mars
saw
set.
the thing about the corporations buying up the Bitcoin right now to like offset the the whole free market idea. And then yeah, anyways, so that feels
Yeah,
appropriate for this what's going on here.
they're hoarding it, BlackRock and friends, and so it's
Mhm.
you know um yeah, I mean, we said so much about it here.
Yeah, yeah.
I come here to the opportunity side of this. I mean, it is a sextile. There is a flow somehow where maybe Mars Saturn has an outlet. I mean, you come to Jupiter and Taurus and Uranus and Taurus. We talked about those examples earlier and how it's not all challenging. And so maybe there's some kind of outlet where instead of the dream, like to wake from the dream, if we just go back to that, you're trying to
Mm.
get into like feel your touch grass. Just, I mean, just that phrase, like touch grass, and maybe what the apple fell on Newton, right under the tree,
Yeah.
and he got that, you know, that myth. But that kind of feels like maybe one way through this in a certain way. Get outside, you know, if you're struggling, and maybe if weather permits, and see what information. I just saw a mutual quickly on X. She said, if you're going through heartbreak, she tweeted this, my elders told me to go into nature and talk to the trees what you're really feeling, like to share with the trees about your pain. And that's how these elders in her, like, an indigenous community, recommended to deal with heartbreak. And that tweet was like 2 million people. I mean, it went super viral. And it's like, because everybody wants to have like a Uranus and Taurus healing session, you know. That's
Yeah.
what it feels like to me. But so
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say when you brought that, right before you brought that up. I was like, we got to turn to nature for the breakthrough, you know, like that's which I personally always do. Like that's my spot, you know, that's I got wherever I can get it. So let's try to get it. Let's try to reconnect with what it means to be in the natural world. So we're all, many of us are disconnected from it. Many of us are scared of it. Many of us are terrified of the natural world because we don't know how to interact with once again our great mother. You know, go back to Ceres energy like that. This is our mother. It was like we're of Mother Earth, but we are actually her too. You know, it's like there's a sort of a paradox of that. So,
yes,
what a time to be
good.
alive. What a time to be alive. So, yeah, this will be a special day, April 10th, Wednesday, especially pay attention to pay attention to the headlines that day, right?
Yeah.
But and really leading up to it, right? Because that's what we were getting here to is the Mercury Cazimi. Which I'm glad we went back because I can't skip over that crucial moon moment.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
can I just continue? Because all I was saying is this feels like now we're coming out of the eclipse season, and inferior conjunction Cazimi is often a turning point with a retrograde where it's like, okay, wow. I mean, the problem maybe is you can see a light at the end now. The delay, now you know how it will be resuming later. And, you know, our whole lives are going to be in a post-eclipse season reality. And we're building to, I think by this point, the hopes of May, you know, where you have the first new moon after the eclipse season. So that's the first kind of new luminary newness in that May Taurus new moon.
Mm-hmm.
So anyhow, by this time I'm kind of
which
looking,
is near Uranus, right? You're like it's right near so
and Jupiter, and it's, I mean, we're back into that story,
yeah.
but it's at least it's, you know, you got Venus and Jupiter together, and there's a whole thing where we really begin. That's one of my favorite months of the year is May, with those pileups, the benefic pileups in Taurus. So by this time, I think I'll be just thinking about like building toward my May climax, like 20 May. If you put 20 May in, you'll see it, and there's some kind of real peak of the Taurian, and the beneficent Taurian that we're all going to get to. Or so that's if you just go the day before, you'll see the sun also there. But so there's the Cazimi of Jupiter, and then Venus and Jupiter meet in May, right in the middle of May.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
Sun, Jupiter, and Venus, Uranus all at the same time.
Yep.
Woo!
And then
Mars on the North Node.
Mars on the North Node.
What a day. May 18th. Who's got May 18th as a birthday out there? I'm curious what your next year will look like.
But it's this, like, even into the next week, everything then comes to Gemini, where the moon is in that Cazimi chart. Like, if you can see how it shifts immediately in May from Taurus pileups to Gemini pileups. And that's where the moon is, right during that in the heart of the sun moment. Because you were looking at the exact Cazimi chart, but I think the moon will be in late Taurus as the Mercury's getting really close to the sun there. So, you know, I think we're forward looking. It's just I think we're forward looking with that Cazimi, because that's where the moon's right in the degrees where all that action happens.
Where did that take me? That took me a weird, because that always rough when that happens. Astro Gold, if you have the thing, like some people don't know this, you got to use the hourglass is such a wonderful tool but you probably can see this if you're watching this. You gotta make sure it's on transiting. Otherwise it'll go to other places in the chart. Anyways, back to April 11th with our
11th.
Cazimi here.
Yeah. And so like the moon, but that's almost half a day of transits. But I think Mercury is within a degree, like that probably is like that late Taurus, early Gemini. You see those degrees that the moon will traverse as the inferior conjunction
Yeah,
is setting in.
Yeah.
And so because of that, I just really do think, and because of Cazimi is clarity and retrogrades are delays, like it really is implying like, hey, get ready for May, because these eclipse seasons and this tough eclipse season, it's not going to be for not, it's not isolated from time.
Yeah.
And pain is not for just nothing. I mean, often it's the struggles, things that are born out of that.
Yeah. Nothing is
And
wasted, as they say.
yeah,
Like, yeah.
so if we want to go, if I think for some people, like I've spent years, but I mean, yeah, basically if we're like spiritually engaged and working with these energies, most people listening to this probably are. I think by this time, this inferior conjunction is really saying, all right, what did we just learn? What is this, 3 days after the eclipses? So
Yeah.
we'll still probably be raw. I mean, maybe. And it's like, all right, let's just kind of go to the future here a little bit. And
Yeah. I just will
you
point
know,
out when we have
mhm,
the Gemini moon and we're going through, Mercury's sandwich between the sun and
mhm.
Chiron there. And that Gemini moon is we get another confront we
Ah,
confront Mars and Saturn again,
yeah.
but in a different
Ah,
space, right? Because it turns over. So
yeah,
by the time the end of that week with April 12th, it does confront us with this again. But like SJ was just saying, it's like, it's not isolated from a space and time. Like, what do we do with this information? How do we challenge ourselves with it? How do we challenge ourselves to the room? You know what? Bring back the journaling. Pull out
yeah,
your journal of whatever you journaled right at the beginning of Aries season when, Mercury was on Chiron. And
yeah,
now we're back to this very interesting moment. See what's progressed. See how you feel now. See where you want to take it. Feels like a
yeah,
profound exercise to do from a mental standpoint for the integration, right?
yeah. Waxing moon. It's like we're growing now out from these eclipses, and yeah, Wayne, Saturn, Mars separating. So there is embedded here a sense of like we're in a new phase with a few
Yeah.
of these cycles and I think we'll feel it. I think we're going to be like, oh, I always do this after eclipse season. I'm like, all right, it's over now, and I can like kind of start re-emerging. Usually I'll be back, my schedule picks up here because I kind of control it now, and it's like now it's the whole new world we're in, right? And
Yeah.
it'll be cool. Like eclipses take and they bring, and a lot of people, I don't think this has to be, what if this eclipse season, like let's say for your chart or for your cycles, like these Aries eclipses can be potent. What if you have a new relationship or it wasn't like the renegotiation was negotiating the new relationship. And now you're,
Yeah. What
the
does that
pain of
look
the
like?
Aries. Yeah. Now you're like, okay, this is my new world. And now you're kind of grooving, so, um,
Which I think is like it brings us to sort of the next event, which is essentially the first quarter moon in Cancer. And the acclamation, right? The emotional
yeah,
acclamation of what
yeah,
has transpired
yeah,
and like letting it sink in. How do you nurture that? How do you nurture yourself within that? How does that like feel in your home space, whether that's your literal home space or the home space of like, your sense of being at home with yourself. It's like it's and I like that it goes through a trine with Mars and Saturn too, right before it actually, you know, contests with the Chiron and the Mercury retrograde and the Sun. So it is that weekend, April 13th, April 14th, and even into that Monday that we're really sort of getting, initiating this change from an outside perspective, but also the inner soul perspective, I think. The
yeah,
emotional body.
yeah. And the sense of like you talked about earlier with the Ceres and Capricorn, like the divine, the mother. I mean, we're back to now, like to
Mm,
the extent our nourishment has been reformulated and kind of reconfigured. I think we get our first indicators of like the kind of new nourishment facilities that we have available maybe out through these eclipses, and like whether it's this new relationship to go with that hypothetical, or whatever the new reality is going to be. So, and look, your Jupiter right with Uranus getting,
I
I mean,
know.
they're like now almost within a degree of each other, and that moon sextiling Jupiter. I think this is, anyhow, I think this would
It's
be a
back to the
cool
bridge
time.
of the moment that I was like pointing out with Ceres, like during the eclipse, like now the moon actually comes along and ironically or not, it opposes Ceres in it, but
Yeah,
it helps to start to deliver
yeah,
all these things in its own sign, like there's
yeah.
like the truth of feeling. There can be a lot of feeling that erupts now, once again for maybe like the catharsis or but it is definitely an integration moment with sort of that body mind soul, like all elements are being represented. I mean, for the most part, we are lacking a little air, but we get other than Pluto, but we do get the air right before with all the, and sometimes we got to integrate that, right? The mind goes crazy with everything, and then you're like, oh no, settle down into the soul, settle down into the emotional aspect.
I
But
love
it
air.
is, yeah, 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 you do.
I'm heavy air, but I was just saying air is overrated, even though someone who's like heavy air and loves the air element. But I love when it's kind of can be accentuated here to the like this. So moon opposite Ceres trine Jupiter. You see, it's like a really beautiful relationship between the ruling planets of Cancer by exaltation and domicile with the sextile, and then this kind of dwarf planet mother energy. I mean, I do think, and it's earth, the earth and water, like watering your
Yeah,
flowers, and it's beautiful. Yeah, I
it
love that
is.
this is here.
It's like supportive within uh the challenge of the self, right? I mean, that's essentially kind of what we're getting here. Especially look, I mean, so this is where, just to kind of sum up the rest of the season here, is that we're going to move to Venus, after I circled all those things, but that's good.
It's okay,
we
no, it's
we move into Venus conjuncting the North Node, and then Mercury conjuncts Venus not too long after that. So basically, what do we have from April 17th to the 19th? We have this Venus Mercury retrograde North Node experience going on, which also feels good for integration, especially for relational
oh yeah.
purposes. Like contract, or like being able to talk things out, having time to sit with it. Mercury changing over with the sun. Venus is still not necessarily as comfortable, but it's not like a perfecting Mars Saturn conjunction. Mars is moving away from Saturn, it's getting closer to Neptune. It's just this, there's a different vibe going on there. But and this is basically how Aries season ends,
Yeah.
with Jupiter Uranus about to perfect a few days later. You can see they're at the same degree. That Venus is ruling that Jupiter Uranus conjunction. So any thoughts of sort of this last configuration with Aries season?
I think it fits with the theme that it's another, let's say, check in the plus column in terms of a transit where Mercury is nearing its completion. Venus is the benefic Venus gets to join a Mercury that's actually quite somewhat powerful here. I mean, it'll be emerging from the sun's beams and probably visible in some locations by this time. And they get to kind of meet, and it feels healing. It feels
Mm,
settling. It feels kind of like finally, just to go back to what we were talking about earlier, we may be able to see the new self and the way forward. Uh, you know, the Aries energy by this time to me feels like the obstacles, the inversions, the shakeups, the real difficult and all of that it's faced this whole period. Finally, we'll be able to say, all right, Mercury's about to station direct Venus with Mercury. Mars will enter soon to clean things up. Like it really does feel we're in the way ahead now, and the moon is now very much waxing. So I like
very
this.
much.
I think it
Yeah.
fits with like green lights, settlement, clarity, move forward. And what a way to end the month, and what a wild
What a
ride it will
way.
have been. I mean, God,
I
what a
know,
wild
right?
ride.
We just went on a wild ride. We totally went on a wild ride there, SJ. So, all right, let's collect ourselves from this ride that we were just on. And the question I always ask at the end of the program, the difficult question of if you had one word to describe Aries season 2024, what would it be?
Uncontrollable.
Oh, I love that. I love that. When you were like using derived houses for the eclipses, all I could think about is the lack of control aspect of thinking about, sixth, eighth energy. I'm like, oh, there's just no control here. So uncontrollable is perfect. And I just
6,
got
8, 12.
yeah, I just got for some reason Diva always comes to me when I'm doing these podcasts. And I got the song, I've got that uncontrollable urge. I don't know if you ever heard about it, heard that song,
No,
but
I
he's
want
got
to
that
though.
uncontrollable urge.
No,
Yeah,
I want to put
look
it
that
on.
up.
I love
Oh
it. I
yeah.
just hearing you sing it. I'm like, that sounds like a cool tune. I
Oh
want to
yeah,
hear
no, you're
that
gonna
tune.
like
Yeah.
it. Oh, maybe
Okay.
I'll send you a link if
Uh,
I
I'm,
can't remember if it's actually called Uncontrollable Urge. It probably is. Sounds like it might be, but classic. And it makes so much sense. It's like so what a good word. What a
it's
good
called
word.
that, and I got it right. I've got it teed up to put on as soon
Oh,
as
I
we get
love
off.
it.
So, okay.
Love it. Yeah, you'll have to let me know what you think. Yeah, it will be uncontrollable. To I don't even know what my word would be. I gotta center. Mm. It was came at the same time. I got burst in flames. Maybe I'm thinking Phoenix. It's like sort of like that kind of like combustible, self-combustible energy, like burst into flames, essentially. Some aspect is gonna burst into flames, whether it's that Phoenix energy, whether it's that like emoliation,
Yeah.
self-emoliation sort of zone. And I mean, honestly, like, you know, uh, self-combustion is not controllable. Like it's like the whole like, theory of it just happens. Um, so yeah, I guess that wasn't one word, it was a couple, but it got it across.
I think it fits too with Phoenix, with the end there, just what we saw with the inferior conjunction, Mercury Venus conjunction, the waxing moon, the moon in Cancer, sextiling, Jupiter and Taurus, and then Ceres and Capricorn, like making those. It really does feel like there's something that's reborn. And I love Phoenix. I think Phoenix is good because that's a hopeful image.
It
Phoenix
is.
is often has a hopeful connotation.
But when that Phoenix is burning, that ain't pretty. That is not, it is like it's undeniable pain that happens. But then you're born a beautiful new bird,
Yeah.
ready to live another 500 year. I don't know how long the Phoenix life cycle is, right? It's a really long life cycle. So it's like, it's not like you gotta like rebirth every day into the flames. It's just that one moment where it has to happen. And then you did it, and then you can live for hundreds of years and be good. It's good. I feel like that feeds into our whole spiritual exploration that we did too, with like karmic ties and like stuff like that. Yeah. So it's much bigger than it might seem in this moment. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm glad we got to talk about this and go into this so deeply. And I'm just like, I'm gonna have to process everything
Take your
we've talked
time.
about here for a while, like for the next few days. I feel like because it's pretty heavy, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, these
It,
themes we've hit on are quite heavy, and I think they're true and real, and they're directly tied to the symbolism of this astrology. And then I'm like realizing, okay, I've got a life, I've got a chart. This is happening in my life and chart,
yeah.
and
So
so
it's not
I'm
just
gonna have to.
speculation of what we're telling everybody else. It's like this is happening within all of us, like us speaking here today. Yeah. So yeah. Well, SJ, thank you for breaking it down with me and taking the time. I know this is a longer episode, but it is the Aries Ingress episode. So we had to spend some time on that Aries Aries Ingress chart, lots to unpack here. So once again, before we go, remind people where they can find you, what you got going on, all that jazz.
Yeah. sjanderson144.com is my website. And you can go there like since we talked last time, like I built a bunch of this stuff on it that art, I've been into like making art from the ephemeris, but I have some like just graphics there that are what I've coded using ChatGPT. So an example of my kind of creative use of that technology. But you can always go there and see like color combinations of planets and signs and where they are. And of course you can
Oh,
link to my
cool.
YouTube there. My X Twitter is linked there. And then my reading schedule, if people want to get readings with me, can click that at the top. And yeah, that's what I've been working on. It's like this paper, got some drafts. I'm hoping to get it published or publish it at the end May, hopefully by the time Jupiter is into Gemini. But it's all about color theory and the planets and rulership and just the stuff I'm interested in. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now. But
Oh, I love that. I can't wait to see more of that. I'll definitely check that out. I love color theory. I'm like all about it. So you're sparking my interest, SJ. I got must know more.
cool.
All
Awesome.
right. Well, where can you find me? You can find me over at energeticprinciples.com. You can find me on IG at energetic principles. And I feel like things will be birthing out of this Aries cycle. It is a sixth house cycle for me, so lots of new work ahead. So stay tuned with that. And if you felt that you really got something out of our time here today, share it with a friend, leave a comment below if you are watching on YouTube. Let us know what you think this Aries eclipse season is going to look like. If anything that we said resonated with you, or you're already experiencing that, or even if you have your own delineations you would like to share, leave a comment, subscribe. And if you're listening to this podcast version, leave a review on Apple Podcasts because it helps the podcast be seen further. And it's always nice to know what people think. So I think have I said it all? We've said so much. Yeah, I think that's it. I guess all I have to say now is thank you, SJ, for joining me on the podcast again. It's always a pleasure to get to chat with you about all things astrology. Yeah, thank you.
Likewise, take care. Thank you for having me, and thanks for the great conversation. And peace to everyone out there. And we'll talk hopefully soon. And take care.
Right. Well, good luck everybody through eclipse season. Our hearts will be with you. And as always, may the stars be with you.